Hello, SMITE fans, and welcome back to Week 2 of the $200,000 SMITE Summer Masters event. As we get ready to kick off this illustrious event for all of you guys, we want to give our shout out to our good friends over at Prime Gaming for being the title sponsor of Season 9 of the SPL. Make the most of your Prime membership. Get your free music, movies, 2-day shipping, and more available to you. Then link that over to your Twitch account and get free games, free content, all the games you're already playing, a free sub to your favorite Twitch stream, and so much more available to you. Thank you so much to Prime Gaming for being the sponsor of Season 9 of the SMITE Pro League. I'm J-Mac. I got Trelly joining me over on the desk as we kick off our second week of the SMITE Summer Masters event. Last week, 16 teams walked through this door, 8 SPL, 8 SCC. This week, only 8 teams are participating, 7 of them being SPL, 1 SCC. We're going to talk a lot about that whenever those sets do start rolling around. Our first one of the day will be between the Camelot Kings and the Atlantis Leviathans. But this is a big one because last week was all group stage play, all best of threes all weekend long, and now we moved ourselves into bracket play. All of our matches today are going to be best of 3, moving into semifinals that are going to be best of 5, and then a finals and a third place match, best of 5 and best of 3 respectively. And we can take a look at that bracket to see exactly what you're going to be witnessing all day. Taking a look at today's schedule, as I said, we start with the Kings and the Leviathans, Tartarus, Titans, Valhalla, Valkyries 2nd, the Bolts, Warriors 3rd, the Jade Dragons, and Hex Mambo, the lone SCC team, will be facing off at the very end of the day, and what a tough match they're going to have for a team over like the Jade Dragons. And that'll lead us to being able to take a look at the bracket to see how it all will pan out for the entirety of the weekend. And seeing, as I said, best of 3s all day today, moves into 2 best of 5s tomorrow. And then on Sunday, we'll start with that third place match, which will be best of 3. And then our grand finals, best of 5. Charlie, obviously, Jade Dragons, Hex Mambo, that's probably the talk of the town just because it's Hex Mambo, the one SCC team. Is there any particular matchup that kind of stands out to you among this bracket so far?
I mean, they all look intense, you know. I think there's a lot of teams that have something to prove at this tournament, right? They want to make sure that they're able to stand on the top of the standings and prove that they can actually, like, compete at this level, you know, consistently. So I'm not going to say that none of these matches will be slouches. Of course, you know, our first matchup today, Camelot Kings versus Leviathans, when you look at how the Kings have been playing, you'd think, like, man, this is going to be an intense one for sure, but you got to give the edge to the Kings just because of how lights out they've been up. You know, another matchup that comes on, as you said, the Jade Dragons and Hex Mambo. The Dragons have been looking near unstoppable ever since they were able to pick up the stream, so I don't think there's going to be any, like, slump of a match, no doubt, but, you know, they're all looking pretty intense.
Yeah, they're all going to be great matchups. Kind of to echo the Jade Dragons, 10-0 ever since they brought Scream on the team, and that includes their time during Masters. I think that Titans-Valkyries match is going to be a good one because the last time those two teams faced off, the Valkyries, I'm not going to say they almost won, but they were like one good team fight away from potentially taking at least game number 1 off the Titans, and then unfortunately they ended up losing that team fight and then lost the set after. So I think that's going to be a very intense one. But as we said, our first matchup is between the Leviathans and the Kings, and kind of talking about the Camelot Kings in general. This team has been on fire, top of the league so far in phase number 2. Took them a little while to get there, at least in phase number 1. Then they came out second place during phase 1 Masters event, and now you're number 1 seed moving into this event. And it's no surprise with the level up this team has had in general, but also the level up that CaptainTwig has had in this phase alone.
Yeah, I mean, Twig is such a pleasure to watch because you know he can play the top meta picks at the top of the standings for a reason. Like he can play the Nemesis no problem, but also he'll play the Naja, he'll play the Thor. The Thor didn't work too well, but you know he's able to play all of these different styles of junglers at such a high level, and I think he's been around for so long. His god pool is so deep for this guy. That's what I'm talking about. That Naja pick. Like who's getting Naja highlights right now? Not too many junglers, and I think. You know, that's part of the reason that the Camelot Kings are so successful. Not just Twig. The whole team is able to be extremely, man, I was gonna say like adaptable, but you know, they have a large variety of picks. I just didn't want to lead myself into a pun there with variety. In the solo lane, they just
might as well. Just do it anyways.
At this point, might as well. Yeah, they have a large variety of picks even in the solo lane, and I think that's one of the reasons that they're just so impactful on the map. You never know what you're gonna be facing up against.
I mean, you never know what you're gonna be facing. You never know what kind of theory crafting this team does, especially when you have a mind like Genetics kind of at the wheelhouse for this team over there in the duo lane. Netrioid back in Season 8 was one of the most, actually the most soloing hunter of all of the hunters in the league. Got more solo kills than anybody else out there. Star-studded roster over there, but they're going up against the reigning world champions of the Atlantis Leviathans. We have to keep bringing that up because they still technically hold that title until a new world champion is crowned. But it's been a little bit of a struggle for the Leviathans. On the up and up, a little bit more recent. But phase number 1, a bit of a struggle for these guys. Phase 2, still kind of having some of those sour matchups. Had one loss over to the Valkyries once again at the end of the phase. But if there's one player on this team that can really be that playmaker, one of those players that can really step up and get things moving for this team, to be Panitom in the jungle.
Yeah, no doubt. Panitom's such a playmaker for this squad. I remember how much that play made me laugh, the fact that Panitom was able to just hot step all of Geno's stuns there. But I think, something to be brought up is, one of the teams that were able to, beat the Kings in regular season was Leviathans for a reason. They can play at the top of the level, no problem. It really just depends on, what style of composition they bring and what team shows up, right? We know that the Leviathans can show up, but what version of the Leviathans are we going to get to see today? That really just depends. There is the running gag that when the Leviathans show up at 11 a.m., they're not looking their best, so we'll have to see if that's something that comes into play here. Either way, Panitom's such a playmaker on this squad. There's so many characters that in my mind you can't even give him, right? Like I don't think there's any chance of him getting like Daji, for example. He's been loving the Osiris as well. Just extremely dynamic player in the jungle, and when you're going up against Twig and vice versa, they both got to be bringing their A game.
And looking at these two players, pretty even as far as the kill department is concerned. Only 10 kills more, at least for CaptainTwig so far for Season 9. Quite a bit of assists extra for CaptainTwig, but that comes to the nature of the Camelot Kings being a very team-centric style of grouping out there. Obviously, KDA's being very similar as well. So this should be at least a very fun jungle matchup between these two teams to kind of see how these teams, kind of pan themselves out. And I think you're right to talk about the jungle matchups and the jungle picks. We're going to see those in the picks and bans for game number 1 between the Leviathans and the Kings. Because mentioning that Daji up a god that's likely to not make her way through, I think that could be said of just about any team out here. I mean, that god has been an absolute menace in the jungle, complete playmaker for specific players in general. I think back to Cuvo Fred's 4-man Palau, all the way back just a few weeks ago, that ended up saving the game and then being the playmaking play that ended up winning the game for his team. But as the first bans do come through, Iset and Lancelot, the first one's taken out. No surprise with Lancelot. Kind of had a kind of a wish-wash week number 1 when he came through. But we've been seeing so much dominance out of this god over in the solo lane. No surprise we're seeing him banned anymore.
Yeah, I think both of these bans are going to be smart here. It seems like the Kings probably, there's a lot of teams that just struggle dealing with the Iset. The Kings don't come to mind because they don't really struggle against much. But just objective play, I think, that circle protection just controls the map so much. You don't really want to deal with that. So I think smart to take that away. It just, really shows the play style the Kings are going for here. They want to be looking at those objectives early, right? That's got to be the game plan, and they don't want any contention for that.
Yeah, making sure the objective play is on top is always the number 1 priority for a team like the Kings, and being able to have something against that objective play for teams like the Leviathans is also important, because it's something that we hammer in every time that we talk about the Kings. They are one of the best, if not the best team in the league at macro play.
Right.
They might not get a kill for 15 to 20 minutes, but all of a sudden you look up at the scoreboard and they're 4,000 or 5,000 gold ahead, and you're going, wow, where did that come from? It's the Pyros, the Golds, the Scorpions, the Totem of Coups that keep getting picked up by these teams. But as those drafts do go through, Iset, Cupid, and Yamoja all banned away by the Leviathans. Camelot Kings will take away that Daji and the Lancelot, so no surprise seeing the second pick, Team 6, take some of those crucial picks away.
Yeah, and there is a few options here in this last ban. Could be the Nemesis, could be that Osiris we were talking about, and it looks like it actually will just be the King Arthur. So leaving that open, we'll see if the Leviathans just want to jump on that immediately. The Khepri, notably, is still open as well, and with Cupid banned, one of the premier counter picks to that Khepri, certainly could be a good option here if the Leviathans did want to, show some presence towards that and first pick it. But you are in a position where you can just grab like a niche side pick, and then you're giving 2 picks up to the Kings. So you got to be careful here. Leviathans want to make sure they grab exactly what they need, and given the fact that a few junglers and solo lane pivots were taken away, wouldn't be surprised if that Nemesis got locked.
No, now option over to Leviathans for that first pick if they want to get something for Panitom right away. Osiris, Nemesis, as you mentioned, both available to the jungle. Khepri if they do want to go that way. Xing Chen still available, another Guardian that's been kind of at the top of the list for a little while now between those support roles. Also the flexibility into the solo, but it will be the Nemesis first pick now for the Leviathans, so that will give them at least some shred when it comes to late game dealing with these tanks, some decent early game pressure as well. But now that gives 2 big picks over to the Camelot Kings. The pick is the litter for them. They'll take Freya, which is not what I was expecting as a first pick, Trump.
Yeah, that was I definitely thought, the possible Khepri lock, and you don't really have to go for it here because you can always grab that Xing Chen, as you said, the Ymir as well. But the Freya is not something that jumped out to me, so either A, the Kings are going for like late game hard carry, or B, they're just looking to get some pressure in that dual lane, and Freya, surprisingly good in the early as of recent with those conduit gem changes and her pulse changes, rather, the pulse upgrade that she was able to get. So, it looks like they're going for some early pressure. You got the Khepri to keep this Freya alive in the late game, and so the Leviathans have got some pressure to deal with, right? They have their jungler picked out, but they also have the option to go for, grab a support here. We already mentioned the Ymir is a decent matchup into both of those picks, notably, so it could be something that Ronngyu looks at. And at the moment, we're seeing a Merlin hover.
This shall be
and
a
actually
day
the
long
Bellona, so there's going to be
remembered.
some Guardians getting banned here away, I imagine, unless, of course, that Merlin's a pivot.
Yeah, 100% could be seeing some support
Lightning
bans.
bolt.
And it will be Merlin, which is kind of interesting to see him as a top 3 pick. Usually Merlin is kind of reserved for that like 8th, 9th style of pick after the next wave of bans come through. Because I'm thinking immediately, one guy that sticks out to me that we don't see picked up yet, we'll see if the Kings maybe grab him, is Chernobog. I mean, he was the hottest thing on the market. Every Hunter player was trying to get their hands on it. Mid laners were trying to grab this god. And so far, we've only seen the Cupid ban and a Freya lock. I mean, what happened to Chernobog, Charlie?
Yeah, I'm guessing.
To this land.
What? Good. The tier is being prioritized. I actually love to see this because I got the chance to talk to Deathwalker. I talked about it during the teleprompter play just a bit ago. I was like, Deathwalker, is this going to be a pick we're seeing more often than not, or is this just like you were feeling it in the moment? It doesn't really work into all these matchups. Knockup immunity really does thwart a bit of what tier wants to do. And Deathwalker said, probably not. It's just one of those things if you're feeling it, and it looks like Variety might just be feeling the tier, and that's why we're seeing that lock in. I can't even talk about the Chernobog when the tier gets locked in, man. That's going to be exciting.
No, 100%. We can kind of forget about that god's existence for a moment. Instead, let's jump into the second wave of bans that are jumping through. Ymir, that matchup that you were talking about, kind of good against technically all 3 of these gods, because Tyr would have to use his ult to get past that one. So at least a smart ban out by the Camelot Kings in that regard. A Muzen Cobb, if you want to get a mid lane hunter for the Camelot Kings. Perfect one to grab there. Ullr's still up if they want to go for another ability. Neith is also still there for BigManTingz if he wants to play that. So a lot of options to the Kings. They will make sure to take a couple of Guardians out. Terra going to be the second one of those ones. And not many players are going back to this Terra. We've seen her kind of pop up every so often here and there. Like maybe I think PBM brought her out at one point. And then Chiron also going to be banned away by the Leviathans. Still option back over to the Kings. Need their mid laner. Anything that pops out to you, Charlie?
I mean, that Chernobog we were discussing certainly could be an option. It's just one of those picks that, I think you're always going to get value from the ultimate. If you're looking for early pressure, Chernobog isn't going to bring that. But the late game, just being able to split up the team fight, I think still does have some value there. And you highlighted the Ullr. It might be a little bit more difficult. You don't know your mid lane matchup, too well at this point because Merlin's not bringing that much pressure, right? You should be able to get that early pressure because Merlin just doesn't clear the wave as of easy. It takes a bit of items before Merlin's able to just like free clear and change his abilities effectively. So we'll have to see exactly what the Kings want to go to try and get some pressure in that lane. It looks like they're going to hold that pick for later. So they want the rat early on.
Ratatoskr for CaptainTwig. We saw him bring it out a couple of times during the last event, during the last few weeks of play. Him and Variety kind of been ping-ponging that god between each other. Like, hey, do you want to play it solo? No? Okay, I guess I'll play it jungle. You want to play it jungle? No? Well, I guess I'll play it solo. Now the Leviathans with their 2 picks. Sylvanas being hovered. Haven't seen him in some time, at least consistently. A few flavor picks here and there. And I think one that maybe stands out the most amongst those 2 is actually the Jing Wei, because we rewind back to Masters 1.
Right.
That was the top pick. Like, if you got Jing Wei, you were probably winning the game.
Right.
Jing Wei plus any, like, top 3 Guardian in your lane as well. Like, you're guaranteed to win that one. Kind of the honeymoon phase at that point, because after that, it was all downhill for Jing Wei. Why do you think we might be seeing Jing Wei kind of pop up again, Charlie?
I mean, it looks like just into the knockup matchup as well as the banish from Freya. That could be why we're seeing the hover here. You can dash out a rattle, you can dash from the Fearless if you play it correctly, and as well the banish. So it could just be a safety thing. Zap doesn't want to get camped, and that actually will be the case. Zapman, one of the premier hunters of I don't want anyone in my lane, like please stay away, and still people come to his lane and they gank him consistently. So I think this is just saying like you can try to gank me, but I am one of, if not the safest hunter in this long lane for a reason. So I think that's the reason, right? It just got a decent matchup into all of these picks, and Zap doesn't want to get camped, and it will be that Neith lock-in. So the AMC and the Chiron, I think smart to ban out by the Leviathans. Those were all good grabs, but BigManTingz doesn't mind. He's got the Neith in the back pocket pretty much always.
Yeah, I mean, when BigManTingz ended up having to go back over to Europe, this is one of the 2 picks that he went to consistently was the Neith, the Poseidon, things that were quote-unquote easier to execute on even if you are playing on that higher ping situation, but made it work every single time. That's why the Camelot Kings were sitting at the top of the standings pretty much the entire time. It was only dropped 1 to 2 sets throughout the entirety of their time. But looking at these two drafts, the Fafnir was locked in alongside with the Leviathans, so that tells me objective play is kind of the name of the game to go up against the Camelot Kings. do you think that the Leviathans have the tools to be able to try and match some of that? And then once we go beyond just the objectives, Charlie, I mean, how are even these team fights looking for these guys?
Well, I mean, it seems to me like the Leviathans have crazy burn for these objectives, right? They have the Fafnir, they've got 3 auto attackers if you're counting Nemesis, Bellona, and of course Jing, so they're going to be able to shred pretty consistently. The issue, of course, is always, can you burst these objectives? Can you pull them cleanly? When you're up against a rat, that's always difficult because he just goes up into the tree and stares at you, and he's like, go ahead, pull it. Like we'll see. It's gonna be a coin toss. I'm gonna knock you guys up, go for the steal, and you just have to sit there and wait. And then if you're just sitting there and waiting, the rest of the Kings can show up. Of course, this is if the Leviathans are making that pull early on. And they've got a ton of damage to deal with as well. I mean, World Weaver from BigManTingz is going to be chunking late game. You know, that Hidden Blade style of build that's always annoying to deal with. As well as you got a late game Freya with a Khepri just sitting in the back line waiting to get online. So I think the Leviathans are going to have to play for some early pressure here. They do have their bases covered, though, because they've got the Nemesis. They have the Fafnir. They have the tools to deal with this late game. But the Kings, they farm the map so well, man. They should be looking forward to this, and they should know, you know, okay, so we want to keep Freya away from this Bellona. Disarm is going to hurt, that sort of thing. I imagine that's already going through the head of Genetics, like just making sure the team is like on point and ready for this matchup.
And then kind of looking down that roster, you know, talk about needing some early pressure from the Leviathans. Nemesis takes a little bit to get online. Bellona versus Tyr over in the Soul Lane. That one will kind of stalemate itself, but Jing, Fafnir, Charlie, to me, not really a combo of a dual lane that really gets a lot of early pressure, wins out on a lot of early skirmishes. Merlin, kind of that same regard in the mid. If you're Panitom in this case, you know, which lane do you try and put some of that priority in? I
mean, I have to imagine the Freya is your easiest gank target because you can force out that Valkyrie's discretion and then just, you know, loop around a couple seconds later and look for the gank whenever possible. But it's certainly not easy, and I think you highlighted that quite well. You're not going to be able to find too much early pressure depending on where you go. You really just got to hope that your team can back you up when you're forcing those ultimates.
Well, let's see if the Leviathans can make it through that early game so they can fight up against the Camelot Kings. Our first match of Week 2 of SMITE Summer's Masters kicks off right now.
Leviathans versus Kings. What a way to start off this weekend. In the quarterfinals day, a bunch of best of threes. And remember, single elimination. Last week you had a couple of chances. This week you lose, you go home as the Leviathans and the Kings go toe-to-toe. And Dolson, Gore, and Doug will be bringing you the action for our first set of the day. And Gore, we were talking about just zoomed out between these two teams. Yeah. We're talking about a lot.
No,
so not what we were talking about. But what we were talking about, if you get my drift, was that the Kings and the Leviathans tend to have two different storylines when it comes to these tournament plays or tournaments of past. And so it's really fighting against history, whichever way you look at it. Can the Kings finally get their tournament win after being a #1 seed? Are the Leviathans going to continue their good play during these tournament events? Lots of fun to be had here in our first set of
Yeah, I'm excited to just watch this one to see how it can shake out. Because like you said, like, you know, the Leviathans, world champions, admittedly Masters, like this first Masters this year wasn't like crazy for them either.
No.
And so maybe it's just Season 9 as a whole hasn't necessarily been like the most revitalizing thing for the Leviathans fans. But again, it's that weird thing. I would definitely give credit to, like, not post-Worlds blues. I guess that's what the players call it, though, where it's like, you know what, you don't gotta win. You just did the win.
I get those every year, and it's because Worlds is over, and then I'm just
sad,
you're just sad for weeks at a time.
I'm wondering, though, if either this tournament, like right here, essentially, they have to make a stand up against the Kings, or if it's going to be a Phase 3 run, like what this team is going to do, because they've definitely, I mean, still flashed us those moments of brilliance throughout the last few weeks. It's just, can you get it back consistently? Can you be the #1 team that you were for a majority of last year?
Yeah, Camelot King. Look, I mean, favored and talked about as the cleanest team in SMITE throughout Phase 2 for good reason. Near unbeatable. With as competitive as the SPL is right now, you're always at risk of losing a couple of games, you know. I mean, with how good all of the teams in the league are, the ability to go through a double round robin Phase 2 undefeated would have been miraculous for the Camelot Kings. So they were always going to be hard-pressed to do that.
Absurd to think of. Like, I think, like, tenure of SMITE, like, that's absurd to try and do. Like, there's been times, and, you know, you go back, like, to like, NRG days where, like, a team, if they are winning and they're winning hard, like, they went 27-1 in one phase, but that one was, like, right in the middle. It's, like, impossible to get all of them in a row, right? But still would have been insane for them, right? The kind of run that they made. And in fact, even getting dethroned slightly was, I think, impressive for the teams that did it. And Leviathans were on that list.
Absolutely, and the Leviathans had their number in that set, and it was a lot of very clean Smite. That's what it takes to beat the Camelot Kings. So continuing that throughout the weekend is what Kings fans are hoping to see. You don't want to see the catastrophic land collapse, and it really starts here. And what a first test for this Camelot Kings team and a way to get their weekend started. But on the flip side, the Leviathans as well, because Gora, you know, even though it wasn't the phase 2 that the Leviathans or their fans were hoping for, still had some big wins over some big teams. Got consistency rolling a little bit towards the end of the phase, but then didn't look fantastic earlier on in week 1 of Smite Summer Masters. Titans looked really good against this Leviathans team. So you don't really know what Leviathans you're going to get here this weekend, but still a good enough squad to maybe make some waves, maybe make a run towards the finals.
Yeah, I'm excited, again, just to see what they have to offer, especially if they're going to start bringing out picks that are just so them, right? I think the Rat is one that admittedly a few teams have run. You know, you go back to look at, I think even last year, one of the best runs the Bolts had was Lasber playing this Ratatoskr over and over and over again, but I think Variety, Twig both play it well. You get the Khepri pick, which I think has just been a huge strength for the Kings. Because right now I'm looking at it, I see Variety for setup, Twig probably for setup and a little bit of damage. Tings, guess what? Setup. Genetics saving Netrioid, who is then going to be the big kind of damage dealer towards the back of these team fights. So I think that their entire composition doesn't rely on Netrioid doing well, but does a great way to serve pretty much every single kill up to this Freya later on, right? You still need the items. You're still Freya. You're still going to take a while, but I think that they have they've drafted something that feels so very them.
Yeah, it's a very Camelot King style of draft. And so that's now where you start to transition into team talk and what you're expecting over the next couple of minutes. You know, Sheento's going to want to scale up in this mid lane. Panitom, though, can get active on this Nemesis when you hit level 5. Really got to be looking at where BigManTingz is putting these World Weavers, you assume.
Yeah.
There's 3 sets of beads for the Leviathans, Panitom, Sheento, and Zapman. But World Weaver into Ultimate from CaptainTwig on this Ratatoskr, even potentially set up from Variety. And we'll get to the tier in a second,
Okay,
Gore.
good, because I want to.
But as far as setup in early game goes, a lot of onus on BigManTingz and Twig to find that global, semi-global 1-2 punch.
Yeah, it's I think something that is going to be important for the entirety of the match, right? Like you said, you throw it in mid, then all of a sudden it's just like, hey, maybe you're going to help Twig get a kill onto Sheento or Panitom. Throw it over towards left. You're easily helping set up the Freya, but you know you have to also look where the beads are, right? You know, beads on Panitom, beads on Sheento, beads on Zap. Tings can just be a single-use removal for those to set things up for somebody. Or if they know once those beads are down, or in Jarcorr's case, no relic chosen as of yet, then you have a wide open opportunity to really just kick down the door and set your team up for some success, right? If Zapman he gets plucked by genetics, let's say in the next 5 minutes, uses the beads to make sure he doesn't get pulled into an awkward scenario, and then just has to eat a World Weaver, you're stuck with that, right? You're still Jing Wei, so you're going to get away pretty easily. But, like, there's a lot of force, I think, for the Kings to be able to force the Leviathans into awkward spots.
All right, Gore, we can talk about it. The tier pickup for Variety here. So a solo lane battle that we're not used to seeing at the SPL level. Of course, you know, all of Waiting Room, all of last week, Deathwalker, 4-man Fearless, knocks the Scarabs out of Smite Summer Masters. It was all the talk of the SPL and competitive Smite, for good reason.
Yeah.
One of the best plays you'll ever see in competitive Smite. I didn't expect it to make waves in this type of way. I figured maybe it's something later on today we see Hex Mambo pick up, maybe a fringe pick here or there. But I guess if there was ever a player, if I was pressed and it was like, Dave, choose somebody who is going to pick the tier that's not Deathwalker, I probably would have said Variety.
Same.
So how much value, how much impact do you really think this tier can have? I mean, comparing it to a 4-man game takeover style of play is always difficult.
Yeah.
But do you think Variety can make a similar impact?
So I think that it's I like how you phrase that, because looking in the past, like before Deathwalker was doing, and again, and post-tier jungle, like for those of you who have been watching Smite for a long time, Lassus did that a ton, right? And then a couple of changes specifically to how Fearless, like the damage numbers on that, but also his cleave, moves him over to the solo lane, things like that. Variety, and I was watching a lot of old Worlds finals yesterday, and so Season 3 against NRG in the exact same matchup, tier versus Bellona, gets a first blood on the Bellona, and that was Dimmy playing it at the time, right? And Jarcorrr, again, another, I think, very astute player, has not been first blooded, so that feels pretty good. And it's not going to happen every time. There's no way. But I think that this is a matchup that is well known to Variety because he's done it for years. He did it on the world stage. This is a matchup that used to happen all the time. Variety, like you said, someone who seems like the person who would go back to tier even if maybe we haven't been seeing him a ton. Are we gonna see 4-man Fearlesses? Probably not. Like, that's just outrageous to ask of anyone.
You've doomed the Leviathans.
But I do think that that Variety, is going to be incredibly impactful. Because again, between the World Weaver, the knock-up from the Rat, the Fearless from the tier, pulls or banishes from the duo lane, there's a lot of CC on the Kings. And if you don't beads one of them for the Leviathans, you're trying to save it, you're probably going to die from that one. If you do beads that one, then the second one's just going to connect. Unless they make a wild mistake, which is something we haven't seen them do a lot in the last, 10 weeks. I don't think that there's going to be a world where this tier doesn't have a large impact. Granted, there are still some ways out of it, right? Like Zapman, if he uses his ult, can disengage.
First World Weaver from the mid lane, and it's on to Panitom, and how about that dive in from Variety? But is the last bit of damage there? No, it's not. Genetics won't hit the damage, but a blink from Variety, and the tier first blood gore. Not onto the Bellona this time, but it is there for the Camelot Kings in their solo laner.
Doesn't have a lot of mana to work with, though. Jarcorrr probably won't be able to get a lot done. Look, it's tier. He's going to be tanky enough at this point. And so he can heal and hang out. I don't know that this is going to turn into anything more, but that's just a good play, right? Good presence of mind. Get aggressive. You force the beads early on with the World Weaver. You make him feel uncomfortable in the jungle. And then it's just easy CC follow-up. Now, you've got over 2 minutes to do it again, right? Fearless is going to be up way sooner than that, and BigManTingz is going to have that ult again pretty soon. So Panitom is going to have to play cautiously. That double dash, it's good distance closing, but beads will come up, Blink will come up for Variety before the beads will come up for Panitom. Things like that can close that distance. The ult for Variety will be there before the beads are up. So there's a lot of engage potential for the Kings just onto the jungler for the Levi's.
I mean, there's just so much setup. I mean, if you bead the World Weaver, and then you got the Acorns or the drop down from CaptainTwig as follow-up. You don't bead the World Weaver, and then you bead this. I mean, there's just way too much, There's so much individual instances of CC from the Camelot Kings that early in the game should buy them some pressure like that. I do wonder if Netrioid is maybe poised for a really big game here on this Freya. If the Kings are able to play this composition like we know they can pull a lead. Bit behind right now as the Leviathans have farmed up very well despite that first blood bounty going to the Kings. So many eyes are going to be in so many places. There's the threat of this Freya just being ignored. So I want to keep my eyes on Netrioid as the game goes on. How about an answer back, though, from the Leviathans? Because we haven't talked much about this composition. Objective burn seems to be the name of the game for the Levi's, which is very important when you're going up against the Kings, being able to match around those early neutral objectives.
Yeah, between the Coerce with technically 3 auto attackers that are going to burn through objectives, and then just Merlin existing, there's going to be a lot. I think we saw it last week where an objective took, I want to say like 10, 15 seconds to get halfway done, and then about 3 seconds when the Merlin joined the fight. Like, the other half of that health bar was insane. So, for the Kings, in most circumstances, it's going to be plays like this, right? Get aggressive onto the neutral objective, try to burn it a little quicker, but neither has really good secure, right? Like, I'm not looking at either of these squads and thinking, that's the ult that we're going to have that is cleaning things up for you, because you don't really want to use any of these as your secure on the board, For Jarcorrr, Ronngyu isn't going to be a secure anyway, but for Zap, you're either using that as an engage for the solo laner or a disengage if you're Zapman, and same thing goes to the other side. Most of those are your engage tools or some extra damaging tools for a team fight, not something that you want to use around an objective. So here's where things get, I think, even more awkward for both teams. You can't burn it fast enough if you're the Kings, and you can burn insanely fast if you're the Leviathans, but as long as someone shows up from the Kings, it's not guaranteed.
Only one team has a Khepri core.
Only one team has a Khepri.
And that's that's all the secure you need. The fact that I have seen
who's gotten more, Khepri Rising Dawn steals or Fafnir Hammer steals?
God. Those are probably pretty close. It's because it's so unlikely either way that they just stand out in your mind every once in a while when it does happen. But it always does seem to be like a Khepri dot or a hammer, doesn't it? And we've got both opportunities here in game number 1. So burn maybe for the Leviathans over the next couple of minutes. And the Camelot Kings have not run back that 1-2 punch gank. Since it happened to Panitom earlier on in this game, that's given Panitom some time to farm up, get the Hydra's Lament online. On the flip side, CaptainTwig maybe taking a breather, wants to stack up a bit, gets the Soul Eater second overall on this Ratatoskr. And Soul Eater's seen a bit of a rise in play, Gore. Not only in the solo lane, but has trickled into the jungle here a bit as of late. Really good stat stick when you get it fully stacked up.
Yeah, and I think that's really what it is here, right? Because it's something that we've seen, like you mentioned, a lot in solo lane. You go, in fact, not even too long ago in solo, it was like a must build on everybody was starting it off. And so it's interesting to see what Twig has with it. Again, survivability, if I'm looking at someone who's going to be diving in deep and needs to live through that and deal some good damage through it, I'm looking towards Twig.
So 1v1, you might think Netrioid was losing it. He was, but then returned some damage onto Zapman. And so ultimate out of Zap, Beads and Shell remain for both of the ADCs. So that's just a net win for Netrioid, who's gotten 2 rings online. Zapman Transcendence into Silver Branch. So an interesting build path, Gore, from the Jing way. And as I already mentioned, no Aegises over there in the dual lane. Both have gone for Shell.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see where he continues going with that. But like you said, with the Shell, I kind of like that. There's a lot of auto attacks on the other side. You know, we were talking a lot about CC, the beads, necessary. Aegis, you know, if you get hit by a World Weaver and you Aegis, like, yes, you're not going to take that damage, or if you Aegis right afterward, the follow-up damage might not be there. But we've seen a lot of circumstances where that's going to still end up biting you, right? Where you're just going to wait out the Aegis and kill you. The Shell's going to help out a lot.
Eagles rally down from Yark, but Twig's direction with his ultimate should tell you all you need to know here. Camelot Kings not interested in fighting. And they'll end up backing themselves off. And then Wind Demon, third item for Zapman. So we'll get into some of that attack speed and get some added benefit for the Silver Branch.
Is that crit as well. It just synchronizes so well with specifically Jing Wei, so it feels like it's going to be really solid. Again, as far as things go, it's nothing too crazy. The Silver Branch is maybe the one that stands out the most
early
for it, just because, like you said, there's not other attack speed items online to stack with it for its passive. Otherwise, it's been doing well. And you've got time, right? I actually think that's beautiful for Zap, too, because it's not like he's stressed about it. You're up against a Freya. She's got Hastened Ring and a Ring of Hecate, is now working on the third one, but, like, Netrioid's going to hit pretty hard. You still don't want to necessarily box when your crit comes online, when your Wind Demon's done, maybe. But for right now, you're more than fine to just kind of coast along in this fight, farm as much as you want, and deal with that. The other thing that's really interesting to me build-wise is specifically Variety's build. Because this is the one, if you've been watching Tier over the last couple of years, this has pretty much been the build, right? You're going to go for movement speed, you're going to get a lot of health, but you're admittedly a little protections light. You're not necessarily going to be doing much more with this other than getting into the back line, fearlessing them, and then doing whatever damage you have left. And it works out really well. We've seen that. It did the other day. But it also has a balancing point. And, you know, I had mentioned it in Waiting Room, but, like, Nemesis seems like that'd be perfect, right? Okay, cool. I'm going to shred the little prots you have, and then this health bar don't matter. We've got a Merlin, right? Yeah, we're just going to burn through you. Things like that. So I'm curious to see where Variety continues to go with this, and if it works out well for them.
Pyromancer not stolen by Yark, and the Camelot Kings will pull and secure the first big objective of the game, but the second up in the air. Can Netrioid make some magic happen? Yes, he can! What a banish! Oh no, I'm wrong. I'm still confused.
It's still a good banish.
Still a good banish. I thought he did. The banish was great, but how about the team fight after the fact? The Leviathans get the Gold Fury, but do they win the fight? Netrioid gets the Scarab's Blessing, and he'll go back, and Zapman starting to catch a bit of fire. First kill of the game over to the Leviathans, and the Gold Fury as well. The timing was so perfect there from Netrioid. He confused even me. But rest assured, the Leviathans get the Gold Fury and a kill on the back end.
And a kill onto the Freya, of all things. Plus both relics, like, Netrioid is a sitting duck, especially without the Scarab's Blessing. This left-hand side of the map, if you're the Kings, I'm not saying you forfeit it, but for the next, like, 3 minutes, it doesn't exist to you. It should not necessarily matter. Just let Net farm up, focus somewhere else. You know, with the Gold Fury down, it's not even like you're losing too much over there. Maybe some buffs that you can focus on, and potentially trying to go for the Obelisk. That's just a good play, though, right? I mean, it was a great banish from Netrioid, unfortunately just maybe a little bit too late, or just on time, but not with enough damage follow-up immediately there to allow him to potentially try and get some shots in and steal that away. And then the needle shots, threading the needle shots from Zap to be able to find that, force a Scarab's Blessing, and then find it again, to the point where when Zap, he threw out the Windgust, I thought he was just going to dash in. I thought he was going for more. A lot of low health bars on the Kings. But again, that's kind of the control that they have. And you had mentioned it earlier, but the farm right now on the Leviathans has just been stronger, right? I mean, whether it's coming down from making plays like that because they have faster objective burn, or even in the jungle where it's just been, I guess, split more efficiently.
Yeah.
Things like that have just been benefiting them. And so I think that the Kings, even though numbers-wise things aren't necessarily completely outrageous or egregious, you're starting to see, like, if their plays don't get started the way they want them to, they might not go the way they want them to, period.
Yeah. I think my brain rebooted to, like, the OG days of that Sanguine roster. I see Netrioid and the rest of the boys.
Oh, yeah, and you're just like, oh, yeah, there it is.
There, he's on their squad. And no, but you're talking about the pacing of the game, Gore, and it is interesting because when you see a draft with Neith, Ratatoskr, and it's the Kings who are playing it, I feel like I'm expecting a lot of World Weavers early in the, even just to attempt, right? I feel like Tingz in a normal, not that this is an abnormal game, but in a normally paced game with this style of comp, you're seeing Tingz just throw those things out, see if Twig can follow up, put some pressure out. We've seen the one attempt from the Camelot Kings. Hasn't been there since, and that's given the Leviathans the ability to farm up and remain relevant. So I wonder if a lot of it's got to start with Tingz throwing out some of those ults and seeing where Twig can find some pressure.
I think it's funny you say that, though, because I almost have the exact, like, if you said, hey, we've got a Rat and a Neith on a team, I'm like, oh, cool, level 5 fights.
Right.
And then you say, oh, it's the Kings playing. I'm like, oh, cool, level 20, or level 25, minute 25 fights. Like, it changes a little bit. And, like, that engage will still be there.
Zapman banished. There'll be a World Weaver for Zap, but it's an airstrike.
It's going to wait.
And then a stun, but not enough damage. So beads, ult, shell, all of it used by Zap, but still no kill for the Kings. I do appreciate them listening in with us, though, and making an effort with the World Weaver and the rest of the gank from a couple of the members. Blink forward. Variety tries to find pressure for the Kings here. It's an odd-numbered fight, a bit awkward. CaptainTwig does have into the Cosmos. Jarcorrr sent back by Variety. It's a long burn of a fight here as the tanky targets meet on the right side, but no casualties.
And at the end of it, well, Hardcore is half health, right? Like, so, you know, maybe a little more awkward. Can still re-engage. Has the Eagles rally. Bede's now forced. And so if the Kings want this fight, I mean, Pyromancer still has like 40 seconds before it respawns here. So it feels like it's forcing a fight that would have been advantageous if they get it. But there's not really anything to fight for afterwards. So I like the call to fall back. It's not worth losing anything over. If you get the pick, that's a win. The minute they got out of there, I like the call. I'm just going to hover around, make sure they aren't going to do anything ridiculous, and then pull back. You already got relics off Zap. Ult's going to be up sooner than the next fight, so that's going to be something that you're still going to have to contend with. But I think the chase down for the Kings is still going to exist there, right? Ratatoskr has a really good dash to continue that follow-up. We saw what Netrioid was able to do in terms of using the ult for a follow-up and just trying to close that gap. And that's ignoring Tier and Neith backflip, which if you're using that aggressively, good on you, Tingz, but also that might be a mistake.
Yep.
It's going to be interesting, again, how this one continues to shake out, because the engage for the Kings is just absolutely insane. And I mean, look at this position. Like, this is a team that wants to play for a fight right now, and they kind of understand that late game they've got a good advantage. I mean, the amount of damage Tingz was able to put out, that Twig was able to put out just in that last one, even though it was onto a tanky target, I mean, they burned Hardcore's health bar.
Yep.
Slow, like you said, but still through it. If that's any squishy target, they're just gone.
Yeah, Tingz will have late game damage. I'm glad you bring that up. Starts Bluestone, so a little bit different. Won't have the Hidden Blade at the end of the game for that instant burst on the ultimate, but still, over time in a fight, we'll smooth out that damage just a little bit. I'd wondered if we would see a return gank, return pressure onto Zapman without beads and shell for the next 30 seconds or so, but instead it looks like the Kings grouping up around the Pyro. And the Kings will confirm the objective, but a reinitiation from the Leviathans keep things interesting. And an immediate disengage from the Camelot Kings. So things stabilize yet again here, Gore. The Leviathans had relatively healthy 2,000 or so gold lead. That stabilizes back out now for the Kings with some good objective play. All eyes need to now turn to the Oni Fury. It's pretty obvious for both squads. Some good left side pressure for the Kings. Maybe pulls both teams, all 10 of them, over to the left side of the map here. And when the games are paced like this, one big fight around the Oni Fury for either of these squads could effectively end the game.
This is, it's the way the Kings love to play, right? I mean, we've seen them get aggressive, we've seen them fight early on, and we know that they can do it. But sometimes it's just nice to farm up. You know, everybody's roughly equal in experience. I think it was slightly favoring the Leviathans, but like most of that was a little bit closer between Jarcorrr and Variety than it is between Zap and Sheento.
Leviathans have burn on their mind, and the Oni Fury is burning under the pressure of the Order side. Frenzy gets used, and into the back line goes Variety. He has found both carries in one set of beats, and it's off of Zapman. World Weaver connects with Ronngyu. Where's Twig going to go? Back to the rest of his team. Nice banish onto Yark. But down everyone drops. A couple ultimates get used by the Kings, and it's a repull by the Leviathans.
Variety, though, ult available, can just simply loop around if he wants to, or just go in.
But doesn't.
Or not. Yeah, okay.
He could go in.
I was waiting for it. I thought it was about to happen.
And I was ready for the Eagles rally to jump in, but both teams playing so cautiously. And again, I mean, the weight on a fight like this long into the game with a lead that is nowhere to be seen.
Literally could just be the game.
Right, could effectively be the game with how good both of these teams are at pushing advantages. Double root from Genetics around the backside goes Variety. It's where you want your tier. He's pushed back Panitom once more, but Nemesis has a double dash. And away goes Panitom. Oni Fury never reset, and the Kings get the Oni Fury. Leviathans will watch it go down. They will ask for no further fight, and their wish will be granted, so the Kings get the Oni Fury and the Pyromancer ultimately.
And that's just a good presence of mind from the Kings, right? Being able to pick that up. Variety is zoning, and just the presence from the tier doesn't burn the beads on Panitom, doesn't have to, right? It's pulling attention over towards themselves, making sure that a lot of the Leviathans are looking over towards that specific engagement around the pillar. And Tings and Genetics just gonna get to creep up, and cool, we're gonna take this Fury now. See you later, guys. I think that that's just a moment where, yeah, you could probably go in for a steal. And again, that's the big downside I think both of these teams are going to have to deal with. Do you want to go in for a steal like that if it's going to cost you your life and potentially cost you more? Map state for these games, or these teams, is roughly similar. You know, if that fight results in any kills, that changes. If this next fight, you know, presumably around a Fire Giant, results in any kills, that's going to change.
Could result in a kill on a Jarcorrr early. Nothing else, a lot of damage. Receives some sustain thanks to the Mail of Renewal. Blinks flip-flopping on either side, and Variety with the Relic Dagger. Why not throw that blink out as often as you can? Yark still under some pressure as Eagles rally. But the similar weight that we had around that Oni Fury and the fight there now transfers to the right side of the map with the Fire Giant, but increases a bit because the objective just more and more important for either of these two teams to grab. So map state-wise, wondered if the Oni Fury would really push things one way or another. Only 2 towers on the entire map have fallen at this point, so we have not seen, now it'll be a third, as only the tier 2s remain for the Leviathans. Have not seen overt pressure really placed across the map. Leviathans still have a lot of towers to work towards, so you won't see these big swingy map state changes until you get a big 5v5.
And it's simultaneously incredibly important that all the tier 1s went down for the Leviathans, and not important at all, because if Levi's win the next fight, get a Fire Giant, those tier 1s are laughable.
Anyway.
They're wet paper, they're just going to punch through. But if they don't get it, all of a sudden their map state is wide open, right? It's much easier to continue pushing things down. There's a lot of minions there on left, right? So there's pressure for the Leviathans that hasn't really been there, right? And it's just kind of mounting pressure for both of these squads. But with the last Pyromancer, with the Oni Fury, with these towers, with the minion wave over there on left pushed up as hard as it is, you're starting to feel the fire underneath, right? If you're the Leviathans, where you can't just force a fight. But if you can catch someone like Genetics, or especially Tings or Twig out early on in a fight, that's going to be huge for you. But you have to be cautious. Variety's going to have the blink backups. Ult is going to be there for everybody, but more specifically Variety, who can use that to get into the back line.
Yep.
Relics are in a good spot for everybody, but it is going to be a much more pressing fight, I think, for the Leviathans to try and find a win. At minimum, just to equalize things if they can get a Fire Giant, or to get some gold back in their pockets to fight away. Again, at a very small, for 25 minutes, lead that the Kings have been able to pick up, but a lead nonetheless.
I think there's some good for both teams here as far as shrouding or not their initiation, their objective burn. It's much more obvious for the Leviathans when their go button is pressed. It's a transformation from Ronngyu, a frenzy, and then the team just W keys, whether it's the objective or the team fight. And there's a lot of W key. I mean, it's hard to fight into that. On the flip side, the Camelot Kings can maybe hide it a bit. Dash in from Jarcorrr, Pyromancer confirmed by the Kings. But it could be a World Weaver, a Blink in, an Ult in. You know, it's more sudden from the Kings, whereas the Leviathans have to telegraph it a bit. Early ultimate out of BigManTingz, but Zapman able to disengage. But here comes Ronngyu, here comes Jarcorrr. Eagles rally, jumps forward, Frenzy gets used. And the Camelot Kings running out of danger, but Variety. Remember, he's got a lot of health, but not a lot of prots, and he is melted through by the Leviathans. Genetics abducted back in, and Sheento deals the killing blow. Finally, this deadlock has been broken.
That entire engagement, I mean, the start of it, specifically from the Kings, that World Weaver, feels like it comes out, like you said, a little too soon, right? The rest of the Kings weren't ready to act on it. Zap was already a good distance away, so there's no good follow-up for it. Then, when the fight is forced at them, the Leviathans are just running the advantage, and now they've got this burn.
Wow, and it's Fire Giant easily to the Leviathans. They run down Genetics. The Scarab's Blessing not able to save his life. Wasn't there for him. And the Leviathans now, again, break this back and forth of a game. That wasn't really all that back and forth as far as massive gold swings go. Back and forth in the pressure department, maybe. But deadlocked were these two teams. Now the Leviathans have the biggest advantage. And your point now, stand score, right? Who cares about a tier 1 here and there? We're going to work them down easily if we're the Atlantis Leviathans. Build back this gold lead for ourselves. Put ourselves in a really, really great spot. And that was always the threat. The longer this game went on, Sheento is going to get his build there. Yeah. Merlin, Jing later on in those builds can shred through the front line of the Camelot Kings.
And this is where things get, I think, even more majorly awkward. Not only is it going to be towers, so that's a lot of gold, but you get that Fury, so that now inherently makes the next either Fire Giant or a Pyro, whatever, a little bit easier for you. But you're also in I just think, a better spot team fight-wise, right? When it comes down to aggressing into... I'm going to start looking at Phoenixes because we're 28 minutes in, right? Tier 2s probably can see a mounted defense from the Kings, but the downside of having someone like Neith, even though she is maybe the most, like, easily swapped in for a mage hunter that exists in the game, it's still not big AoE abilities, right? You've got one line shot, you've got one that admittedly is going to provide a debuff for everybody, heal you a little bit, but it's not like these wide damaging abilities. It's not a Whirlpool. It's not anything that's in Merlin's kit or a Crush or something from Asilla. And so when it comes to some of these defenses, the groupings from the Leviathan still isn't as under threat as it would be if this was completely mirrored on the other side. And so they've got to be careful, I think, with how they mount these defenses, where they put them. But they still have good engage. So I wouldn't mind seeing the Kings, especially with this only still being about 1,000 gold separating them, maybe try to force a fight anyway. Even though there's a Fire Giant, you've got really good engage. Tings hits an ult on somebody who steps out of position, and if you have someone ready to capitalize on it, that's just going to be a kill, and that'll just completely end the power play.
I mean, Gore, we're still waiting on it, right? We're still waiting on the second rendition of a World Weaver into a Rat. I mean, it happened once at like 5 minutes, and then not again for the last 25 minutes of game time. And the Kings, we know they love these slow-paced games, these objective-secure style of games. But even in those games, I'm used to seeing a few more attempts at the Neith plus CaptainTwig gank. You know, we saw it once as a catch-out in the jungle, not even a real full-fledged gank. Then they did, to their credit, send a lot of pressure towards Zapman that one time, but then there was no return pressure while his beads and shell were still down. The Leviathans were always going to get to this point where they could burn down the objective with Transformation, Frenzy, Merlin, Jing was always going to get to that point, and the Leviathans have been able to capitalize. And you're right to look at Phoenix Siege here shortly. Wonder how Variety is going to fare in some of these fights, because the last time we saw this tier go in, health bar just got melted through, and a lot of that has got to be Zapman. Because for chin size, yes, for the health shred, look at that, 2 auto attacks, 3 auto attacks.
Oh my god.
Right, and he's going to be hitting hard. Spectral armor's there for Variety.
Yeah,
but sure, you ignore the crit, you ignore a lot of the crit damage, sure. But then you got health shred. You got 20% pen with the silver branch as well early on in this build. So that might be the biggest threat to Variety on the map.
And you know what?
Well, you got Sheento too, you know?
I'm completely convinced of that. Yeah, Sheento, that's the thing. If Variety is stuck in a spot where Sheento is able to fire off literally any ability in his kit that sticks on Variety for more than a second, that's a lot of damage. That's just going to burn through his health bar. Zap, though, that showcase might have been the best one. 3 autos was 1/4 of his HP, and Zap is going to get way more than 3 autos off in a fight. And so, you know, for Variety, like you said, there's a little bit of prots. Like, you're ignoring some of the crits, so the Wind Demon, the Deathbringer, maybe not doing as much as they would otherwise. But because of the chin size, because of your Transcendence, because of your Silver Branch, like the other stats that you have that are stacking and making sure that this specific autos are doing even more, it makes it harder to just survive as this tier, as deep as he would like to be. But it's a fun spot, I think, to be in if you're the Leviathans as well, because, I mean, what are you worried about at this point, right? Like, I mean, the engage that we keep hyping up just isn't happening. 4 of you now have beads. They need something bigger.
CaptainTwig being melted through as well, but Zapman has taken a chunk of damage. Might have been the World Weaver that caught him out, and Twig has been jumped on by Panitom, and the Leviathans have now finished off the jungler for the Camelot Kings. And it's just prior to a Fire Giant, 15 seconds till FG goes down. Twig never used his ultimate, never had a chance to get in or out. And it's now worst case scenario. Again, the Kings won't have a say unless they want to take a 5v4 and this Fire Giant dropping.
I think they can attempt it, right? Like, they can at least show face
go
here.
fast.
Because you've got a lot of damage. But I don't know if it's one that you want to commit everything to.
It's a bit early from
At the same time, I mean, is your defense going to be that clean that you want to just let them have the Fire Giant? Probably not.
And
if
it's
EFG.
enhanced, right? It's enhanced. That's a nice double dunk in the back from Yark. Jump forward from Ronngyu as well. Yes, Variety has found the back line, but Panitom and Sheento have found the damage as well. Frenzy burning away on the Leviathans. Fire Giant now returned to. And the Camelot Kings still in a 5v4 for the next 5 or so seconds. Fire Giant starting to melt. Can the Camelot Kings find a steal? No, they can't, and the Leviathans get the EFG. But Variety has eyes for Sheento. Netrioid gets the Scarab's Blessing. BigManTingz drops one. Zapman has lost his FG buff. And that's maybe as good as it'll get for the Camelot Kings. No further fight.
Again, does it completely kill this power play? Probably not. I think the Leviathans are still in a good spot to get aggressive. That tier 2 on right, at least, should fall down. Phoenix on left. If the Kings don't get it, then the Levi's will. But the Kings, I love this call, right? Play aggressive because you just got the kill. You've got the timer to work with, so they're going to get themselves, theoretically, an Oni Fury here. And then it's going to be up to them as to what they can do with it, because if this is something that Panitom steps out of line for, well, all it takes is one stun, one fearless, and suddenly someone's going down. The Levi's have to actually play carefully despite the EFG. I still think they have a lot of presence on the map to be able to exert around the towers and stuff, but this fight might decide it.
Oh, Jarcorrr gets abducted back. What are we fighting over, though, for the Leviathans? I mean, at this point, the Fury is gone. Zapman is still gone for 5 seconds. Yes, you're ahead, but the Leviathan's now caught out, and you have now lost a second Fire Giant buff. And Gore, what's worse is Ronngyu is juggled with Zapman. Now Ronngyu is dead for a minute and back and respawning. Now Sheento can get jumped on, and Variety has been able to follow up. Sheento, though, still lives. Shell gets used, and Variety burnt down as Netrioid deals a killing blow onto Merlin on the other side, and Zapman back from base tilts the scales back towards the Atlantis Leviathans, and this is what we're fighting over. We're fighting over Zapman's second chance, and look at the Jing way go on the other end of the Scarab's Blessing. Genetics will drop, and the Leviathans have stabilized.
And look, Genetics is just buying time. Twig is just buying time. If they live, then good for them. If they don't, that's just the price that it takes, right? I mean, that's a good fight at first, like you said, but it was just wait for Zap. It was just bring him to. This is such a ridiculous chase, by the way. Finally, he's able to get it. But look how much that it opens up for him. Like you said, you lose 3 EFG buffs. They lose 4 people, and maybe if Zap had just followed them, maybe the game. If he was up here, that Phoenix would have been shredded, and this Titan would have been very easy to kill.
Zapman still might get here. Lots of damage onto Jarcorrr. Panitom will help in finishing the mid lane Phoenix. So everyone from the Camelot Kings is going to be able to get back up, respawn, have some say in the end of this match. I'll admit, I mean, if the Leviathans were trying to bait there, it worked on me even, because I'm thinking when Ronngyu dies, there's no way the Kings keep getting pulled forward. They end up losing a big fight. Zapman is so strong, though. Twig baits out. Divine Judgment. Knockback from Variety, and Twig dropped by Panitom. And my goodness, this Nemesis at the end of this game has really started to come alive. God, this is uncharacteristic from the Camelot Kings and the Leviathans at points here in this game. Been messy really from both squads. Just one catch out here or there makes all the difference, and suddenly you might lose.
I mean, that's 2 moments now, characterized perfectly by what you said, which is, what are we fighting over? Like, why? What does Twig gain from being that far forward? There's nothing to fight. And now it just gives the Leviathans an unnecessary numbers advantage. They're going to continue pushing forward. That's 3 Phoenixes down. They don't need this fight to go their way. They've got the fight that's happening for them. It's going to happen on left. It's going to happen in mid with these fire minions. And, you know, Fire Giant, for the 2 people that still have it, it's going to disappear in 20 seconds. So maybe It is a brief breath for the Kings, but is it worth it? I mean, like, now you have to fight. There is an objective to fight over.
Yeah.
And it just feels like things have skewed maybe too far in favor of the Leviathans for them to truly take it because of really, really weird and discordant engages. And from both sides, right? I mean, like, that one's easy to throw at Twig's feet because what's he doing up there? Same thing on the other side, right? When Ronngyu got out around the Fury, it's like, all right.
And Zapman before that?
Why? Yeah, and like, you know, there was a certain extent. Panitom stepped up to try and steal. And I feel like some of the Leviathans stepped up to try and be a protector for Panitom. That's where maybe the mistakes kind of started to roll through. Just a really interesting choice for both of these teams over the last couple of team fights. And unfortunately for the Kings, it's done nothing but favor the Leviathans.
Yeah, right. Yeah, the Leviathans have been the ones coming out ahead of the individual picks and the catches out. Now for the Kings here, square one, checkbox number 1 around this enhanced fire giant is not losing one of your team members, whether it's Genetics or Twig. I want all 5 team members on the map so I can contest this EFG, and I think you have to, Gorr. I mean, you're 3 Phoenixes down. You don't have teleport, scanning the relics really quickly, although it'd only really be variety. Fire minions are going to be working their way down left. If you're going to do something, you got to do it soon.
Variety, speaking of, is the one that I want to keep my eyes on. Lots of wards here to try and catch out movement, specifically from the tier. Gets burned down easily if Zap or Sheento is dealing damage to him, but if Zap or Sheento are the ones that get fearless, it becomes a lot easier. But this is the go button for the Leviathans. Twig just backed as well because of the fire minions. This is going to be an easy advantage for him.
Great timing. Might not be 5v4 as far as who's alive, but it is 5v4 around the EFG. Netrioid gets the Scarab's blessing because his health bar MIA. Fire Giant's health bar MIA as well, and the Leviathans get the EFG. Gorr, it seems simple now for the Levi's to win game number 1. Dogpile on the Titan.
Yeah, look, Net used ult and relics and genetics ult and still barely got out alive at this point. You're going to be, I want to say, having to buy time, right? Left side Phoenix is going to respawn. Mid should be shortly thereafter. So Leviathan's probably going to do some due diligence, knock down the objectives before they go in for the fight. They've got fire minions all around them. It's still a 5-on-5, though. And again, with the fight that the Kings have, they can force it to happen just outside the Titan room. But if Sheento is allowed to free fire, free cast onto that Titan, the game's done. So you really have to pay attention to Zap's damage. You have to pay attention to Sheento's damage. And someone like Variety has to make a huge play here to make sure that they don't lose.
Yeah, Zapman might need to be priority number 1, though Panitom has put together a really nice game as well. In Variety, a simple step forward means half of his health is missing. Same with Genetics, and an Eagles rally in from Jarcorrr. But around the left side goes Netrioid, and look at the Titan's health bar. Or what was the Titan's health bar. The Leviathans, as 5, walk into the King's base. Gorr, the Leviathans in a interesting paced game number 1 will end up taking it. And a nice 1-0 advantage. Remember, this is best of 3 still, and an elimination set. Kings got to win 2 straight.
And it's this awkward dance between the two of them, right? I think some really good plays early on from the Kings and from the Levi's, right? We got to see a lot of good farming from the Leviathans that continue things into a comfortable spot for them. And then a little murky in the middle where there's a couple of overextensions on both sides. But it's that first Fire Giant fight into the steamroll afterward, into the next Fire Giant fight. Like, the Leviathans got themselves rolling, and then they just finished out with the momentum.
I think if you're the Kings or their fans, you're wanting to see a bit more proactivity early. When you have a composition like that, throw some more World Weavers out, throw some more semi-global utility from the Ratatoskr out. Didn't see much of it there in game number 1. And the Atlantis Leviathans, they showed up in our first quarterfinal set of the day. Game 1 to the Levi's, game number 2 coming up next.
Game number 1 of our first set of the day goes over to the Atlantis Leviathans. They're able to find a nice game 1 over the Camelot Kings. But before we break down that game, I have a very important announcement, guys. If you have not already completed the Heavenly Light event that is going on right now in SMITE, you don't have much longer. That is going to be ending soon. And that's going to be your last chance to get the Tier 5 Queen of Hearts, or Queen of Cards. I think it's Queen of Cards Izanami is the name of that skin. So if you want a chance to get that great skin, an awesome evolving concept with it, so many cool things about that skin, and so many great skins just throughout that entire event in general, make sure you pick them up now because soon you won't have an opportunity to do so. So make sure that you jump in, client, right now and pick those ones up. Talking about game number 1, though, Charlie, felt kind of odd out of the Camelot Kings specifically more than anything. This is a team that's known to kind of group up, get their 5v5s going, but there weren't many opportunities in game number 1 where the Kings really got a true 5-on-5 fight. I mean, I kind of pinned back to that last little Gold Fury fight that happened when then 2 Phoenixes go down on the Kings side where they go in, they find their pick on Jarcorrr, he beats, he gets out. Then they do it again, they get Ronngyu this time, they kill him, and at that point you're like, cool, that should be the end of the fight. And then it wasn't, and then they lost the fight, and then they essentially lost the game off of it.
Yeah, it was one of those situations where, you know, you're like, what are they fighting for? I think Gore highlighted it pretty well, where it just didn't really make sense why they were going in at that point. Maybe they were just tired of sitting back because 26 minutes in, you got 2 kills, and I think that was kind of the mindset. We're like, let's just fight because we want to fight. Didn't really work out. The Leviathans, you know, it was a back and forth game, and of course the Camelot Kings had that goalie that we expected, but there was no team fighting really. And I think that's the weirdness of it all. Panitom had a fantastic late game on this Nemesis, you know, 0-1 by 30 minutes, but was able to turn around like 4-1. Zapman as well, a solid performance on the Jing way. It was really just biding their time, waiting until, you know, Ronngyu could turn into a dragon, buff that attack speed, and make sure that the carries popped off. That's really what it seemed like. And, you know, this is why Jing Wei was looked at for such a long time. She has that ability to just pop these characters like balloons, you know. Once you're getting those crits online, you're doing the crazy damages. Can you get to that point? Well, if there's only 2 kills before 30 minutes, yeah, you'll probably get to that point.
Yeah, I mean, we looked up at one point, it was 31 minutes and barely 3,000 to 4,000 gold separating the 2 teams. Leviathans had the slight lead at that point. And again, it's what we come to expect with the Kings. They're usually slanted towards the late game, even if they're behind a couple thousand gold when they come to late game. Their team fight is what makes up for it, but just questionable plays, fighting over a red buff that I don't even recall that was even up at that time to try and go after they had just gotten 1 pick. And then what happens? Zapman flies through, a few crits hit a frontliner, and all of a sudden your frontliner is gone. And now the rest of your team is currently running away from AoE crits that are coming from a Jing Wei. Just kind of questionable decisions by the Camelot Kings, and good punishment by the Leviathans. I think that's the point to kind of drill down there, is that the Leviathans were punishing these kind of odd play styles of the Camelot Kings.
Yeah, I think that's the way to highlight it, right? It was just, you know, they're able to punish it. And, you know, if you're not going to team fight, we'll sit around these objectives, get a pick here and there. I mean, all it took was one really big fight where the Leviathans were able to win out, and then it just sort of seemed like it was too late. I mean, 3 Phoenixes down and Hands Fire Giant Hand, even if you get a massive engager, it's very difficult to keep that Titan alive, as we saw. I mean, Sheento on Merlin, you get to that point, a couple spells on the Titan are going to do like half its health. So it's a very difficult spot to get in. From the Camelot Kings this game, I want to see, you know, some form of initiation, right? Some form of like, okay, we're not just going to get rolled over and sit by. You know, it's one thing to play for the late game, but if you're playing for the late game and then not fighting in the late game, it just didn't really work out. And again, I think looking for fights around the objectives as opposed to like during, you know, like a red buff, for example, would certainly suit their playstyle a little bit better.
I mean, we were looking at 15, 16 minutes in, and Netrioid is literally W-keying under Tier 1 tower to try and kill Zapman. Got both relics and an ultimate away from him, so it felt like Camelot Kings maybe had control then, but when it came to the late game team fights, it was all Leviathans. They take game number 1, and we move in to game 2 picks and bans between the Leviathans and the Camelot Kings. First god's going to be banned away. Is going to stick to still be that E set, not making sure the Kings, with the flexibility of just that god in general, the objective play that she offers, make sure to keep that one out. And now it's kind of the question to the Kings, do they kind of change anything up as far as the draft was concerned for the Levi's? Because it wasn't like the Leviathans got like all of the S tier characters necessarily in that game. They were kind of going back and forth amongst like the tiers on there. So when it comes down, do you think that any of the picks and bans really need to change for these 2 teams?
I mean, I wouldn't say the picks and bans are what we need to focus on. I think just a very uncharacteristic game from the Camelot Kings. So whatever was boggling down their minds at the moment, You know, let's just wipe that and continue into this game with a completely new mindset. Short memory has got to be the mindset, and it looks like the Nemesis will actually be the one adjustment made. So Panitom will not be able to run that one back. Did have a fantastic late game performance on this character, which did in fact lead open that King Arthur, which means that Arc's going to be able to grab that one immediately. The Leviathans, they didn't even hesitate. They locked that King Arthur pretty darn quick.
Yeah, Jarcorrr said, hey, top pick solo laner, I'm pretty good at it. Might as well just go ahead and lock that one in for myself. Camelot Kings now have a decision to make. Last time, it was Freya Khepri as a top 2. And that's not a bad top 2 to get. I mean, Freya, late game hyper carry, also scales pretty well early and mid game. Khepri, one of the better scaling guardians and just one of the top guardians in general. But making an adjustment away from the Freya, this time going over to Chiron, something that both Netrioid and BigManTingz have gone on record showing of how good they are on them.
Yeah, I definitely like this a little bit better. I think the Chiron's going to come online much earlier than a Freya would, and of course if it is going into the hand of Netrioid, I think that he just, for a while he was only playing Chiron, right? It was just like every time we looked over towards that dual lane, it was just Chiron, full red items, blue stone, and then Centaurus just like half healths anyone at late game. So I think that's got to be the play style the Kings are going for, and as well as Khepri never going to be a bad time. You know, wasn't able to find too much success, but I don't think too much fault of genetics in that first game. But I see no reason not to grab that Fafnir. Even before all the auto attackers are locked in, Ronngyu was able to buff the team, make sure they had tons of objective damage, and might as well grab the Merlin as well. So now Leviathans have put themselves in a great position because there's plenty of top picks that are still available for jungle and ADC, but also it's like, are you banning out the Jing? Like, is that something that you have to worry about? Given the fact that the Kings haven't drafted that knockup based or like that composition, I wouldn't imagine that's too high on the priority, right? You know, there was the Rat, the Tyr, and the Freya, all great matchups for Jing. This time around, it's not screaming to me Jing is gonna pop off here. Doesn't mean she'll ever be terrible, but I don't think there's gonna be too much pressure put towards her.
Final pick for the Kings before we jump into the bans is going to be Artio, so it is a shift up in the soul lane, going away from the Tyr that didn't get so much in game number 1 for variety, instead going for something maybe that can at least counter a matchup somewhat, at least against King Arthur, trying to keep that god at bay in the lane. Then as the bans start going through, Chernobog actually going to eat a ban this time around, maybe expecting that because, as you were saying, not a whole lot of knockups on there, so not really worrying or wanting to deal with maybe the potential of Jing being as something that the Leviathans would draft again. It will be a ban over towards that Hunter. So 2 Hunters now taken out between Sheento and Cupid. We'll see if any more go through between these 2 squads. And the Osiris ban out here, as we've mentioned, no jungles just yet.
Yeah, I think just holding on to the jungle matchup because you want to get a good matchup in the jungle, right? So like, I'm going to sit back and I'm going to, Twig's like, let Panitom pick the jungle and then I'll counterpick. And then Panitom's like, let Twig pick the jungle and then I'll counterpick. There's going to be a game of chicken here that someone's got to lose, unfortunately. But the Jing actually will receive that ban just in case. I think the crit damage a little bit too much to deal with the Camelot Kings. Zap had a good game on it, right? I think that's more so the mindset here. Don't ban something that's just like really strong in the meta. Zap's feeling good on Jing. We don't want Zap back on Jing. I think that's a smart call. Don't want to feed the hot hand. And now the Leviathans have their option. Do they want to take away one more jungler just to throw a wrench in the mix and try and get some sort of different game set here? Of course, the Ratatoskr is still available if Twig wanted to run that back or find something else. And it looks like the Erlong Shen will actually be the choice. And now the Kings have their option. Are you going to sit back or are you going to wait for Panitom to pick your jungler and get that counter pick?
It's actually so wild to think, Charlie, because if I'm dialing back to week 1 of Masters, we saw like no Erlong Shen at all. Like no teams were picking him up. Nobody was banning that god. He goes hand in hand when you think of the auto attack warriors. Throw the Osiris, you want to throw maybe the Gilgamesh and kind of the mix. So he's kind of ability back and forth between those ones. So it's so strange to see the Erlong Shen kind of be that next band up, maybe just the CC that he offers out there in the jungle. But when we're talking about a god that offers CC, Batz may not have a ton of it, but the little that he does have is pretty good for team fights.
Yeah, one finger cannot pick lice out of your head.
That's true. You need 2.
Yep.
You got to be able to grab him and pull him.
I mean, I just love the Batz lines, man.
He's got the best ones in the game.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, like, what does that even mean? Like, most characters just say their names or like just something to charge on, but Batz just giving us some knowledge. Just so if you ever did try to pick some lice out of your hair, you gotta use 2 fingers. The Oleron is being hovered here, so some heavily magical focus damage so far from the Leviathans. We haven't quite seen the jungler yet, which could, influence that a little bit. But with the Oleron, that tells me a lot of team fight presence that the Leviathans have already drafted so far, right? You got the Fafnir, you're going to be trying to get some auto attackers online. As far as like auto attack junglers that are available, I mean, you know, the Kali is something that comes to mind. It's not one of the picks that we've seen as of recent. It doesn't have a great matchup into the Hunbats or the Khepri, but just something to get value out of the Fafnir could be what the Leviathans are going for. And you need some heavy physical damage, because at the moment you're hovering in Olorhun, and it's not going to be just Yark that's doing all the damage. You need some other damage dealers for the Levi's. So they're really thinking about this one, though. I think just because of the fact that, you know, there could be some more CC immunity drafted here from the Kings, and they don't want to put all of their weight on the sanctified field. So they're going to think about this one for a little bit longer.
Yeah, and I'm kind of wondering there, Charlie, is Olorhun, you know, the next best hunter to grab when we look down? It's Cupid gone, Chernabog, Jing Wei, and Chiron. I mean, we saw Neith out of BigManTingz for mid lane at the very least. Probably not something we'll see in dual lane too many times anymore.
The moon
but then
will
there's
purify
still
this
plenty
land.
of other options for hunters. I mean, Artemis is out there, Shibalanke, Heimdallr just kind of come to mind if you want something
Bifrost,
there.
aid
We
me.
will see Heimdallr and Tsukuyomi. So there's the physical damage that you're at least asking for. Now for the Camelot Kings, maybe what comes to your mind for BigManTingz to pick up here?
I mean, they're going to need either some magical damage or like that AMC, for example, something to shred some protection. So, I mean, there's a couple different options. You know, they've got some decent setup here. I wouldn't be too surprised if we saw like the Cuckoo locked in. I still think Poseidon can get some value up into, you know, the picks like the Tsukuyomi. If he ever ults on, you can kind of just drop the Kraken at your feet. There's a couple different options that you look towards when you think of BigManTingz in a matchup like this. You're up against Merlin, right? So you're going to be getting pretty early pressure. Late game, you got to watch out. You're trying to match that DPS somehow. And, you know, whatever pick BMT goes to, and then again, the Chiron could shift towards that mid lane, as we've already highlighted. It really just depends on exactly what the Camelot Kings are trying to do with their draft. I think you need a big burst ultimate here. You
Go
need to be able
forth,
to
my
match
children, and
what
take
the
over
Leviathans
this
are doing. And
land.
actually, just going to lock in the Tiamat. All reliable, I like to call her. I mean, she just does good damage. She doesn't have crazy early pressure, doesn't get rolled over. It doesn't have crazy late game damage, but it's not going to be bad. So I think just one of those picks that can really slot into any draft.
The old reliable of the mages for Tiamat, and then at least for Zapman, the old reliable for him. This is something he would typically bring out in Game 2, Game 3 situations when they need to try and solidify themselves a win, and more often than not was able to find some success through there. So now for the Atlantis Leviathans, we get a look at their comp. Still some objective focus with at least the Fafnir, but some decent bursts and some pretty good dive, at least out of the Tsukuyomi. But does that maybe kind of worry that the Tsukuyomi being that all-in style of God to go up against a draft that the Camelot Kings has, Trelly?
Yeah, whenever you see a character like Tsukuyomi that wants to just dive the back line, just use that piercing moonlight, and then you're in. Like, you can't go back out. You are stuck to a target, and there's a Khepri in the mix, that could bring some trouble, right? If you just choose one target, get a Scarab's Blessing down, you're already in. Like, you're stuck in the fight at that point. But, you know, as we've seen these junglers go towards the Tsukuyomi as of recent, they usually are able to pick their targets well, right? You're not going to be just diving without some way to get out, without your team having your back, and without like an Aegis or something like that, because you know you're going to be diving deep. So it really just depends on how Panitom wants to play this pick, of course, but I think he'll be just fine as long as he keeps track of where genetics is on the map.
Maybe genetics and potentially also Netrioid. So two forms of kind of pseudo-death immunity, at least out of those two picks. One being able to have an immediate revive, one at least ignoring it, unless he can meet the X conditions there, at least with the Chiron. So dual lane may be a little tricky for Panitom, post-level 5 at least. So do you think maybe if he can make it to that dual lane pre-level 5, that would be a good option at least for Panitom to go to for the Levi's?
Yeah, it could be an option depending on, you know, if you get your ultimate before, you know, the dual lane hits it, you're always going to have a decent opportunity to try and find a gank. But I think Variety is going to have to play pretty safe here. Up against King Arthur, sure, you're going to have some decent pressure there, but if you ever dash on the wave and Panitom's close by, you know, you got some opportunity for a dive there as well. So I'm just looking at both of these junglers. Of course, CaptainTwig never really got online last game, right? I think it was kind of sitting by on the rat. You don't want to let that happen again. So I expect to see this Hunbats at level 5, of course, not before, because Hunbats really does need that ultimate to start making some impactful ganks. Look for beads, burn them immediately, and hope the rest of the team helps him out as well, because I don't see too many opportunities for beads burning here, unless, of course, genetics is just hitting those abducts or those roots. You're going to want to help out Twig so he can influence the map.
Well, the Levi's are able to take game number 1. Can they keep that momentum going? It's go big or go home for the Camelot Kings in our quarterfinals, and we're going to go over to game 2 with Dulcin and Gore.
Luckily, the Camelot Kings have BigManTingz to go big or go home here in game 2. You don't want the storyline to continue here if you're the Camelot Kings, the team that is fallen out of all their tournament events too early. They do so well during the regular season, but come LAN time, come tournament time, a team that has struggled to step up, struggled to win those events. In Gore, if you would have told me that the Kings were on the verge of being 2-0'd in their first set of the knockout phase, the tournament phase, the quarterfinals, I would have laughed at you. But here we are, the Camelot Kings, after a Game 1 loss. And I think it's got to be a reset, Gore. Uncharacteristic game from the Kings. Didn't see much activity early, which isn't necessarily uncharacteristic, but never really brought it together for a team fight late. Maybe have a better composition for doing that here in Game 2.
Yeah, it was one of those, like you said, it just didn't feel like they played the comp, even though it was a comp that was very them-centric. Like they played it maybe to its full extent, to the point where, coming into the day, based on the way these two teams played, over the last couple of weeks, even with the Levi's semi-resurgence, I think, last week to make their way here, I honestly would have told you that I thought that was going to be a 2-0 for the Kings today. So losing the first game.
Agreed.
A, would not surprise me then if this ends up being a 3-game set. But 2, that's going to tilt somebody in chat that I said A and 2. Either way, I'm not correcting it.
That shows you I'm still waking up, right? I'm still
it didn't even register.
A and 2.
But 2 is that I think the Kings here have gone for a draft that is even more, into that style, right? Twig's on the Hunbats, man. I mean, that is just Twig, I think, to a T. Very much, I said the same thing with the Leviathans when we were watching the draft.
Whoa, what's that double stun? Is that from Jarcorrr? It is enough, regardless, to force the Camelot Kings back. Anyway, Gore, you were saying.
Well, yeah, so Twig, Hunbats, hand in hand. The other one that catches my eye, because we were talking about the Leviathans being the matchup the lineup that I thought was like them, right? Panitom on Tsukuyomi might be the weirdest one out of there, but the other 4, like, if you were choosing gods for this team, that's probably where you're going for a majority of them. But the one that stands out maybe the most is that King Arthur over in the solo lane. And it's because he's been super prominent over the last couple of weeks, right? I mean, just absolutely forefront of a lot of people's minds, forefront of the draft, to the point where for some teams, it was a ridiculous win streak. I'm looking at you, Dragons. Or a forced ban, right? You had to get rid of it because you didn't want to deal with it. And I had a friend, I'll give him the shout out, it was Coldfire, who had asked me, he was like, wasn't there like a meta, like last year and then the year before, like whenever King Arthur gets big, someone rises with him. And sometimes it's Cullen, but the last time it was Artio, and it's like, so where's Artio? And for a lot of it, it was like, well, she's not great, right? Like, she's not necessarily going to be maybe the best matchup into him or maybe provide as much. But this is what I like to see from Variety, is kind of recognizing that matchup, saying, I'm going up against the King Arthur, let's grab the Artio, we're going to have a little bit of healing, good long-range CC. I might get bullied in lane, but I'm also a Guardian, so good luck killing me, things like that. So I think that, for the beginning phase of the game, you're in a good spot. Late phase of the game, as you had mentioned, which is somewhere the Kings normally tend to profit in a lot of what we saw from phase 2, you've got Tiamat, you've got Hunbats for Fear No Evils, you've got this Chiron for Netrioid, which in most cases I would argue is not an early game god, but the way Netrioid plays it is so good late game.
Zapman, is that a lot of minion damage, I think, finding its way into Zap. Bifrost doesn't go that far either. But Med from Ronngyu doing just enough to keep Zapman's health bar a bit more topped off. So getting some good lane pressure are Genetics and Netrioid in the onset of the laning phase. I don't want to move on from Panitom on the Tsukuyomi just yet, though, because definitely unique for Panitom, but I think just unique in general as far as jungle picks and jungle priority as of late. And think about when we've seen it, how disruptive it has been. I mean, I think easy to forget Tsuku as a jungler with so many other priority picks. CaptainTwig still at 4 here. Doesn't get the damage onto Yark. Panitom's level 5. Could be first blood. Piercing Moonlight right on time. Delivers Panitom to Variety's doorstep. And the Caltrops deal the killing blow. Leviathans and Panitom on the board first.
And it's a balancing downside, right? You've got Hardcore and Panitom hitting 5. If you're Variety, that level 5 mark does not mean anything for you compared to them.
No.
And unfortunately for Twig, still sitting with the big 4 next to him. So, I mean, that one comes down to about as simple as it is. They got ults first, they farmed stronger, and they were able to get in there to get first blood. That Piercing Moonlight, like you said, so good at diving deep. And, if you're looking at where were some of the strengths, or maybe even weaknesses, trying to get towards Tings in a lot of those early fights last time around, Leviathans weren't able to get to the backline. Tsukuyomi just does that. He just decides that he's back there now. And so I think that there's a lot of potential that this pick for Panitom, not just for this first one, but I think just in general, is going to be a lot more hands-on than what we got to see out of the Nemesis because it's a completely different style of play.
Yeah, I think we're gonna need to see more answers from Twig specifically early on in this game if Panitom is able to keep up that pressure. Because think about, I mean, it's really unblockable dive. It feels like. I mean, sure, genetics can peel. You got the Scarab's Blessing. That'll be important as the game goes on. You got an Aegis or a Shell if you're one of the carries. You can mitigate a lot of the damage of Piercing Moonlight. But Panitom will be there by the end of it nonetheless, right? I mean, Panitom is going to reach the backline with a Tsukuyomi ultimate, which is why at times maybe feels like a slept-on pick, but a really good opportunity here. So I think, yes, late game. I mean, two teams so good at late game team fighting. We're gonna get there eventually. Might come down to the junglers here big in game number 2 to set their teams up better. And a lot of that's got to be Twig to try to keep pace with Panitom.
You have to think maybe revitalizing as well for the Leviathans. In a year where things haven't been going well, getting game 1 against the Kings has to feel really solid. But like you said, with Twig, specifically, it's an even worse spot for you to be in, right? Batz loves to farm early on. And yeah, around level 5, you can start getting active because you've got Fear No Evil. That's a great ultimate. But it's still just not enough, right? Your damage doesn't feel like it's as solid as it could be. You might be able to find some confirmation, but it's not as much as some of the other assassins, so he wouldn't mind just hanging out and farming a little bit.
Ronngyu, abducted by genetics and a Fear No Evil onto the Fafnir. Nice little burst heal, med, hammer, all of it. And that is just the Mail of Renewal.
Yeah.
So med plus Mail of Renewal. I'm incorrect there. So a couple instances of healing there for Ronngyu. That'll help sustain up this Fafnir. And not the shortest cooldown in the world, Gore, on that Fear No Evil from Twig. So over the next couple of minutes, his pressure is now slowed down.
And I don't think I could thank Twig more for just illustrating the point I was trying to make, which is like, great, you dropped your ult, now what? And the answer is nothing. He just jumps away. Doesn't have beads or anything. You know, the CC is there. Chiron is with just a Transcendence, not even starting stacks just yet. At the time, didn't even have that. Yeah, they're just not going to hit that hard. So, you know, you're looking for people who are dealing damage in a meta where it's hard to get early kills and with itemization where it's almost next to impossible to get those unless you have very specific styles of God, right? A Bluestone King Arthur is going to be able to find kills early on. Maybe the Merlin, maybe a Heimdallr, but for the most part, you have to have a very specific person in mind to maybe pick those up. And now I think we're starting to see what is going to be the duality, right? Twig is going to have to wait because there's just not much you can do on your own. Everybody else isn't really there yet. If you're the Leviathans, while we mentioned Panitom being able to dive pretty easily, the getaway from the Kings is also remarkable, right? Variety has a dash. Twig has a leap. Tings, guess what, has a leap. Genetics has a dash. Netrioid has a dash. Like, everybody has the opportunity to try and get away.
They do. And that's where I think a lot of the mid-game starts to turn here for the Camelot Kings. Gonna need some time to scale up, though, if you're BigManTingz in the mid lane. You talk about not getting there yet. Well, when you've got 3 stacking items from mid to the left side of the map between the Thieves, Book of Thoth, Transcendence, you're right. A little bit of added time here for the Camelot Kings to get some of that damage going early. Now, not unlike what the Leviathans have going, Warlock Staff, Transcendence still for Sheento, and Zapman together, of course. But, you know, when you talk about late game for both of these teams, of course the Camelot Kings have just been doing it better this phase, been the best team in the league at the late game scrapping. Potentially some early game scrapping here. Fear No Evil will not end up hitting Jarcorrr, so you gotta deal the damage somewhere else, and Yark just spins away. One tower shot onto Variety. Is Panitom going to take the Piercing Moonlight? Yes, he will. It'll deliver him towards CaptainTwig, but CaptainTwig leaps out. And the 2v2 on right ends with no kills.
I mean, look, that's just unfortunate for Twig, right? Like, that engage is so clean, except that Jarcorrr just plays it a little bit better. Again, I think incredible that he's able to find the timing that way, right? He hears a blink, and immediately he's like, cool, I'm going for the ult. I'm going for a grab. I'm doing whatever I can to just get off of the ground. And maybe more unfortunate that the King Arthur ult lasts as long as a Fear No Evil, so it's sitting there just ticking awkwardly. You don't have the damage, you don't have the CC afterward. To the point where Panitom might have been able to turn that around even with the aggression from the Kings, how much they wanted to chase that down. But I admire, again, a little bit of patience. He gets a lot of damage out there. They force the silly looks out of Twig, unfortunately, and trade out a couple of ults. But I think that goes to show just how hard it is to be a Hunbatz in modern day. He's just not, he's not well equipped right now for this specific game.
Not for a lack of trying though from Twig,
No.
and that is, and again, it wasn't all on Twig in game
Give
one.
him like 10 minutes though.
Right. But that's what we were talking about a lot in game one, just on the Kings in general, is they have this comp that can look for individual picks and just didn't quite come to fruition. Now we're seeing the Fear No Evils dropped in attempts from the Kings, but hasn't resulted in kills just yet. A quiet 1,000 gold lead for the Leviathans in the first 10 minutes of the game, as we just now crest over that 10-minute mark. Some good power spikes starting to get hit though. Healing, or anti-heal rather, for the Leviathan seems to be the name of the game. Brawler's Beat Stick plus Divine Ruin for Panitom and Sheento alike. Gonna get some healing from Variety. I imagine built-in kit as well. You got a meditation there for genetics. So a couple items that you might want anyway. Get some early penetration online as well. Good look for the Leviathans. Pyromancer may be taken by Variety, but no. The Leviathans will group up, they'll burn it down, and they will grab it for themselves.
And that's just what we were talking about last game, but in action this time around, right? Like you immediately 10.5 in. Pyromancer's only been there for 30 seconds. You're Merlin. You're going to burn it down really quickly no matter what. And so I like the amount of pressure that we're starting to see from the Leviathans, just kind of taking the lead and seeing how far they can go with it.
CaptainTwig, blink. This time Fear No Evil connects, but immediate beads out of Jarcorrr. And the damage again gets turned around. This is now like the third time an initiation from the Kings is then counter-ganked by Panitom. But now the second time in a row, no kills end up dropping over on the right side of the map. Jarcorrr finishes up his Mail of Renewal, skipped the tier 3 for a moment to go into that Genji's guard, then reverses back. Now we're officially at that point where it's going to be hard to burn down this King Arthur. Plus he's got beads and the ultimate as well. Might be time to shift our focus elsewhere.
Yeah, good news, beads are down for a little bit. Honestly, I feel like the Merlin would be pretty easy to capitalize on, right? Like get the beads out once, come back in a couple of seconds. Guess what? He's not going to, like, no CC immunity anywhere in the kit. He's just going to be susceptible to some of that, well, any damage that you throw his way. So I'm surprised to see that maybe some of that focus hasn't turned mid. But maybe it's just because, again, Tingz, you know, you're on Tiamat, hits pretty hard late game. Is going to take a little bit of while. So I was also stacking as well, like went for the Thoth early on, so it took a little bit amount of time before they actually got there.
And then Twig goes Transcendence with his second item.
Second, yeah.
So maybe that's starting to lend itself to the mindset you were bringing up where...
You can give him another like 8 minutes
right,
now.
You're right. We want to fight late mid-game anyway. But you'd really love to be able to scrap more effectively around this Gold Fury. The Leviathans have pulled, and the Leviathans are going to burn this quickly. It's got to be a steal from the Kings that does not arrive. And the Leviathans group up. They've got a Fafnir. They've got a Merlin. They've got Zapman, who's going the same exact build as game number 1. Why not group up and burn down the objective? At least an answer from the Camelot Kings. The mid lane tier 1 tower gets dropped by a grouping of 3. But the 2 neutral objectives have gone to the Levi's.
I also admire Sheento in that fight. It is a lot to ask a mid laner. Like, he dumped every cooldown onto the Fury. And just, like, that presence of mind knowing that that's how committed they were to the objective. Not worried about genetics, not worried about any engage. They didn't think anything else. It was just burn it down. And like you said, there's a small answer back, but I think that the Leviathans have been showcasing that this comp is strong at exactly what they're using it for, burning down objectives as quick as possible. They've managed to do it now with the Pyro, now with the Fury. I think that if they can keep this pace up, you know, a small gold lead becomes a large gold lead, and they just have to continue at this rate without worrying too much about kills going either way, at least for a little bit, right? Once we start to see now with that Transcendence, whenever it gets finished stacking for Twig, I have to imagine that's going to be a very large power spike. But they are fighting into something that no matter what is going to feel a little rough, right? You know, you've got Contagion from Variety to deal with some of the small amounts of healing that are going to exist, specifically in like the meds, your mails of renewal, things like that. But you've got the Brawler's Beat Stick from Panitom, already feels really good. And the best Divine Ruin applicator in the game in Merlin, so he's going to have a very easy time dealing with healing that is picked up from any items, from the meditation, from Variety, like all of them on the side of the Kings are going to be dealt with a little easier. So I'm curious to see how healing numbers will skew and maybe change some of these fights late game. When the anti-heal is applied, when it's not, who it hits, all of that I think is going to be very important for both of these squads. Because it's not massive heals, right? It's not like you're getting a Hell 3 in the middle of the fight or anything like that, or Emoja 2. But it's enough healing that it's going to save someone's life, right? I can already see someone walking out with barely any health.
Well, think back. Was it Zap? Maybe no, it was Ronngyu just earlier this game. You know, again, I don't think the Fear No Evil on the left side by the purple buff ultimately kills Ronngyu anyway, but there was Melee Renewal and Med slowly ticking that health bar back up, and it completely slowed down any reinitiation from the Camelot Kings. So we've already seen a small instance of that. I don't think it can be understated. I mean, I'm not going to be doom and gloom just yet. Kings far too effective at fighting into even small gold deficits.
And it's
They have, right, it's like near 2,000. They have proven to us as a team that this is not a scenario that they are hitting the panic button on just yet. But I don't think it can be understated the threat of how this tournament completely changes if the Camelot Kings end up getting dropped out first round here, the #1 seed. I mean, the favorites coming into this tournament by most, the Jade Dragons have been playing really well recently. If the Kings lose this game and thus this set, and
the entire terrain of the league changes.
It opens up. I think it opens up to anyone that's remaining in the tournament. I mean, it already is open anyway because of how competitive the league has been, but the potential tournament favorites on the verge of maybe being knocked out here in game #1.
2 sets.
Right.
In phase 2, they played 16 sets and they lost 2 of them.
One of them to the Leviathans, though, Core. There's a lot of groundwork still to be laid here in game #2, but to get ahead of it, the weight of this looming Leviathans lead can't be looked over. Camelot Kings have been such a consistent team, and that's why you still have to give them some due credit here in game #1. It's been a slow pace from both of these squads. Game #1 was very, very slow as well. It comes down to potentially this next round of objectives, maybe the one after that. I do think the Kings need to start saying, okay, we can't let the Pyro and the Oni Fury, or the Primal Fury go for free this time. We did it last time. It's built up this gold lead. Might need to at least split here with the Leviathans.
And I like where they're at already. I mean, they're the ones on the Pyromancer, right? They're making that proactive call, but it's, again, not easy secure for them.
Kings drop it. Leviathans closing in. The Kings are able to re-pick up and then grab the Pyromancer. So at least denial from the Leviathans. Checkbox #1, check it off. Kings have gotten at least one of the 2 objectives, closed up that gold lead a bit, brought it back to almost exactly 1,000. Experience the exact same as well. Now, good news for Twig, even though hasn't been able to hit pay dirt yet with any of those Fear No Evils, has slightly been out farming Panitom. As a 1-level lead in the jungle is built up, and then 1 level for Sheento in mid, hence the exact even experience discrepancies here. So it's really going to come down to shot calling and team fighting here soon, Gore. And in 5 seconds, it might be around that Primal Fury.
Wouldn't be surprised if the Levi's maybe make a feint towards it. I want to say first, just because Merlin, but I think no matter what, it's a fight, right? Fire Giant, it's a little too early for that with the amount of gold separating these 2 teams for anyone to feel really confident with it. But we also have been seeing, and admittedly, this is going to come down to just premier shot calling.
Yep.
Some of these get traded out, right? If the Leviathans or the Kings get caught out, starting up a Fury, Leviathans or Kings, again, whoever isn't starting it up, very easily, if they've got the positioning right and they're on the right side already, able to just kind of augment where they're standing and go for a Fire Giant and burn it down, right? I think it's more susceptible if the Kings pull a Fury, but the Levi's burn an FG faster than anything just because of the merits of their draft here. And that's really where things can get kind of problematic for them, right? Like, I think that, once again, we're looking at 2 teams that have great team fight, not a lot of objectives secure in and of itself, so when it comes down to trying to make sure these Furies stay your Furies, or this Fire Giant is your Fire Giant, it gets a little difficult in the midst of the team fight if things don't get leashed immediately to guarantee who's going to get what.
Yeah, shot calling and ward coverage has got to be near perfect from the Kings. Because you're absolutely right, Gore. One grouping of the Leviathans that's left unchecked at this point in the game is a burnt objective, whether it's Fire Giant or Primal Fury. Leviathans have pretty good ward coverage around the FG right now. Nothing on the actual objective from the Camelot Kings just yet, whereas on the flip side, Primal Fury pretty well covered by the Kings. So neither of the 2 objectives likely to go down without any pushback from either squad. As similar support builds have started to round out here, Gore, I always like looking at the relics. Was Frenzy for Ronngyu in game 1. Now Bracer, and also Bracer for Genetics as well. Both have Melee Renewal, both have Thieves. Different orders, but we reach the same stats nonetheless. But it is that, it's utility in different ways. Scarab's Blessing versus really that AoE coerce that makes a massive difference for Ronngyu. I think that Scarab's Blessing going to be important, Gore, especially come team fight time, where Panitom is able to hit those piercing moonlights, find that backline. Gonna have the ripcord from Genetics to help save one of his carries.
And I think that Genetics is going to have an easier time this game making sure that happens the way that they want it to. Last time around, Variety was relatively squishy. Look, the tier build, as much as it gives you movement, a lot of health, cooldowns on your relics because of the Relic Dagger, it does not give you tankiness by any metric. You just take a little longer. Maybe, I guess technically that's tankiness. You take slightly longer to burn down. A build like this, you're going to be standing for a little while. So that's one less target that Genetics has to even bother thinking about, right? You've also got a little bit of healing coming from Variety, so that's going to help augment, I think, more of this team staying alive. And with the way Netrioid plays this Chiron, with the way Tingz plays Tiamat, I feel like Twig is going to be the recipient more often than not, unless the Leviathans just get a very excellent engage and are able to jump onto someone like Netrioid. We saw that a couple of times on the Freya. Feels like it could still happen on a Chiron, but with Giddy Up just existing, it feels like overall the Kings have a much safer disengage for their entire draft.
Primal Fury now pulled by the Camelot Kings. Leviathans are aware that this is going on, but needless to say, Kings not able to match the pure shred that the Leviathans would have. And so this is just a response check from the Camelot Kings. And Leviathans, they've passed it, they are here. But Variety blinks for it, double stun, and it's Zapman who's down to half HP. Fear no evil onto the Bifrost, and Zapman will never reach safety. And it's a perfect engage from the Camelot Kings. A one-man advantage to the Chaos side, rallied around the Primal.
And look, just a great engage for them, and now maybe able to do a little more. Jarcorrr wants to fight.
Primal Fury gets dropped by the Camelot Kings. Genetics use the Scarab's Blessing onto himself, and so the Khepri remains on the map. Now Ronngyu left alone. Should be another one for the Camelot Kings, and it is. And the team fight is ignited. The Kings will find two, but the health bar's too low to stick around for the objective.
I can't believe Panitom. I mean, Sheento's still hanging around here. Like, if the Kings start that up, yes, take the fight. Literally any other scenario, I like what they're doing. Back away now, right? The fact that they stepped up, even just to maybe call out some backs, was impressive to me. Great fight, though, from the Kings, right? I mean, Leviathans, I want to say maybe kind of stymie their losses because they don't end up losing the Fury and things like that, but that's just such a good deep dive from Variety to immediately make Zap super uncomfortable, then to be able to have Twig follow up with a great blink ult. I mean, it's just such a synergized dive for the Kings that it feels so clean. And they get the two, or at least one of the two, I think that are going to be the hardest to lock down. Zapman, Heimdallr's usually pretty safe, so that was a great choice to be able to get rid of.
Yeah, the chain CC and really the Fear No Evil, the blink, the sudden Fear No Evil from Twig. Makes all the difference in the world there. Panitom never got to use his Piercing Moonlight either. I mean, any fight where the Tsukuyomi isn't taking his free backline card generally isn't a fight that you're going to feel very good about. Primal Fury ultimately will go down for the Camelot Kings. And suddenly Game 3 doesn't seem that all that far off for Kings and their fans. We're holding our collective breath. Still need to, though. I mean, 500 gold, 500 experience. Nothing to write home about for either team. And I think probably smart on the flip side, Gore. While great plays from the Kings, get both of the neutral objectives, said we might just want them to split, get both of them, equalize out this game. Probably smart from the Leviathans not to overextend, to realize, hey, it's okay. We'll lose the objectives. At worst, we're going to be right back to even. We're only a little bit ahead anyway. Let's not make things worse than they are.
And that's where I think you had mentioned it earlier, but the vision for the Kings was phenomenal around the Fury. That helps them get to Zap in that first fight, and then at that point it's just scattered. Nobody's really grouped up. They've now shifted that over, until just now where the Leviathans have thrown down the wards that were in their inventories. Vision, in terms of objective secure, great for the Kings on the Fury, now great for the Kings, or was great for the Kings on the FG. Leviathans taking control, at a pace of a game like this, it kind of does bring up like how important wards can be, that little bit of vision, the capability for some of these sentry wards or the bracers as well for dewarding and trying to take away that vision. If this jungle is lit up on either side, it's so much easier to choose your engage and to react to it, right? Like if you're Tingz and you can see where the King Arthur is, you know better where to position yourself. Whereas if you're Zap, like in that last fight, and Variety knows where you are and you don't know where Variety is, there's not a lot you can do. He's going to be able to find a path to you pretty easily. So that's going to matter a lot, especially if Ronngyu gets picked.
Oh no, Ronngyu doesn't get a choice in his fate. The Camelot Kings abduct, fear no evil. Both get used, and Ronngyu, just absolutely melted through. It's the risk of buying 2 items as a support and fully upgrading your relics as you're not as tanky as you maybe could be. Another blink in and another double stun from Variety has found some necessary targets. Twig in the backline all this time. The Leviathans are pushed away. Camelot Kings have grouped up around FG, and they should get it.
Yeah, unless Panitom made, I would argue, a mistake of a play. There's no way that's going to change out. And so that's, again, just good engage from the Kings and recognizing that you don't need multiple kills, right? You don't need to save some of those ults to make sure that they land and find a 4-man fear no evil. Like, no, sometimes you just got to kill the one dude. And that's all that you had here is Ronngyu falling down. But that's enough. There's your presence on the front line. If Jarcorrr runs forward, the same thing's going to happen to him. And so on and so forth. I do like what the Leviathans had done. They had saved up a couple of trebuchets, so they did have one pushing here on right, one pushing over on left that's still available for it. And that's going to at least give them a little bit of leniency up against the Kings here. Not enough that it's like it doesn't balance out, right? It's not like you're sitting there like, yeah, our trebuchets are going. I'm so glad we lost that fire giant. We'll nail it. Yeah, so you're still going to end up losing out on a lot. I like the way the Kings are playing this, right? You're backing off.
Ooh.
You're going to pick it up. That tier 1 is dead.
Launch it!
For sure.
Sender!
Man, these things, I don't know, like, I've never personally launched a trebuchet. But I feel like if you're in wartime, you're gonna load a little faster than that. And there
you go, tier 1 tower. All right, so at least gets a tier 1 for the Leviathans and a little passive gold. Yeah, I know. Yeah, you got people running all over the place. Now I'm gonna leisurely, although that's like a massive stone to stick in the
in
the spoon.
Like,
I'm gonna call it the spoon for
spoon.
lack of a better term.
The ladle.
The ladle. At any rate. Some nice gold back to the Leviathans. But Gordon, you know, I'm going to stick with it. A weird couple of games, only in the sense that we haven't gotten, like, one big 5 versus 5 brawly team fight in either of the 2 games. We're 26 minutes into the second game, and it has felt like individual picks and then dropped objectives after that. This time it's Ronngyu who gets picked out. Last time it was someone else on the Leviathans. It might be Sheento here. As Variety blinks forward, the Aegis saves the Merlin's life. And there is some pushback, but Twig was not here for the reinitiation. The Hun Batz is now.
Yeah, a lot of relics, though, used by the Leviathans. Like, this tier 2 might as well just disappear. Contrary, though, to what we were talking about last game, where it was the Neith on the defense. Merlin on defense when he gets back. Really good, right? Giant AoE abilities, a lot of burn. Once he joins in, this should be a good spot for the Leviathans to try and fight.
Sheento well underway in his build, almost done with it, in fact. So yes, Merlin at the spot where you expect. Look how far back he is. But
and rightly so.
Right, yeah, it's been the blink, fear no evils, the blink stuns from Variety that have just made all the difference in the world. And I suppose they have the ability, the Kings do, to play a bit more reckless, for lack of a better term, because of that Scarab's blessing from genetics. You have a lot of time here to play with if you're the Camelot Kings. Almost a full minute remaining. Fear no evil onto Zapman. Oh my goodness, but Twig is burnt through. And now the go button pressed. Ronngyu is transformed. Deep in the back line is Jarcorrr, but he'll backpedal his way towards the front line. Scarab's blessing on Variety. Piercing Moonlight still there. There are still 4 ultimates ready to go, although Ronngyu is transformed and Sheento doesn't need to. But still some reinitiation. Will Panitom take it?
Right.
No, he gets burnt down by BigManTingz, and the left side Phoenix stands.
Variety's able to get out of there alive. Look, if you're looking at this in terms of wins and losses, that's still, I think, a dub for the Leviathans, right? You should have lost your Phoenix. You lost Zapman, but he was able to pick up a kill. He killed off Twig. You get a lot of damage out there. You force the Scarab's blessing. For the Leviathans, that's about as good as you can get, and they've got 20 seconds to try and push this in with Sheento just existing on the map, Ronngyu full health. I don't know that the Kings can get in here anywhere near the amount that they would like to. And now you've got a trebuchet in mid. Again, maybe not a huge deal, but something that's giving you a small win.
I mean, between Caltrops and Sheento's abilities, there's full coverage on the initiation into the Phoenix line of the Atlantis Leviathans. One nice arc with the little spikes, and the last circular bit of coverage from Sheento on his, what's the purple stance?
Void.
Void. I don't, my brain completely blank. Fire, ice, and then void.
That's because, like, you hear fire, ice, and you want to think, like, earth.
Earth or something, right. Well, on the Aang skin, yes, but Void for Sheento, the circular Void damage there. That.
On the
zones
Aang
off
skin,
last
that's
little bit.
air.
That's air, right. But it's so hard for the Camelot Kings to work through that. Kings don't get the Phoenix. They do get every tower but the tier 2 on the map and a couple of Furies throughout the duration of that Fire Giant. Kings handedly in control as far as gold goes. Should feel comfortable stepping up to this next Fire Giant. This one will be enhanced though, Gore. Leviathans might feel like they have to step up to it.
And I think as long as you don't step out of position, don't get caught
Somebody's
out.
going to get picked.
Yeah,
right?
if we get an actual 5-on-5 fight, then it becomes interesting. But what's going to happen is Twig is going to blink forward and either die, or someone on the Leviathans, and, you know, I'm sorry, Ronngyu, but eyes are looking at you just because you're the Fafnir, you're the one that's going to get caught out, is going to get Fear No Evil'd into a wall while the rest of the Kings just kind of beat him up, and then that's going to be where it falls. Or maybe it's going to be Variety. No, he falls back. I like the way that the Kings are approaching this. Again, stay grouped up for both sides. Vision, once again, very important. Sentry wards over there on left. Some deep wards here for the Leviathans to make sure that there's no coverage from the Kings. But that threat, the engage, the double blink, the Artio, and specifically the Hunbats, all of a sudden, just makes a huge difference. And, you know, I mentioned it earlier when we were talking about Variety in Game 1. And so I feel like I should mention it here because Twig... Admittedly, we burned the facilitator jungler into the ground.
Yeah.
And it's because he's way more accomplished than that. He's able to do way more. That being said,
Still can.
while watching very similar, because guess who was on a team with Variety? Twig.
Yep.
Highlights during Worlds, you'll never guess that Twig was like 1-0-16 when they were winning. I mean, he is just an assist monster.
Well, it's not. I think it's progressed from only facilitating to can facilitate, yes, but also can carry games if need be. Gotten the 1 kill, the 3 assists on the Hunbats, and the number 1 seed has fought back in the way that we figured the number 1 seed would. Hoping to catch the Leviathans a bit asleep at the wheel, maybe. Camelot Kings put pressure on the mid lane. An awkward position for the Leviathans here. I don't know if you can do much about this tier 2 tower, though they will. They'll jump over the wall. Will Ronngyu and at least defend it now for the time being. Maybe just hoping to buy some pressure. I'm looking for trebuchets, things like that. That's not coming. And so the Camelot Kings just push in the mid and then rotate back to the enhanced Fire Giant, pulling the Leviathans every which way.
Yeah, it kind of ruins the Leviathans' positioning around the fire pit, right? Like having to walk awkwardly in the jungle.
We're going back mid.
And I like this, right? Because, I mean, what are they going to do? I actually, if the Leviathans were able to catch it out, they don't have the wards to see this. If Leviathans had caught that out, there's a world where they just rotate and burn down the FG, but the ward coverage is so good from the Kings, they don't have to worry about the objective.
That's funny.
And for the Leviathans, it's either get good positioning around the Fire Giant pit or defend your tier 2. You can't have both, and this time around they chose at least somewhat decent positioning around the FG pit. But the Kings just have all the advantages.
And the Kings now have an advantage, the positional advantage around the enhanced Fire Giant. It is low, and it is dropped by the Camelot Kings. A Fear No Evil, just to be sure, but that does slow down your team fight ability. I'm not sure the Camelot Kings are worried about it. Centaurus from way in the back line gets nothing from Netrioid. Should be a disengage here from the Leviathans. Although Jarcorrr goes in and a full clean 5 enhanced Fire Giant from the Kings. That is fantastic give and take from the Kings, forcing the Leviathans to reposition.
And now it comes right back to this defense, like you said, between the Caltrops, between Sheento. It's almost impossible to get to the Phoenix line and feel confident, I think, in your ability to do enough damage. Sheento should be a pretty solid defense, has his beads as well. So a deep blink, even though Fear No Evil's not up, but a deep blink from someone like Twig isn't going to make as big a difference. I think that 1v1 over there in mid is going to be a big, important factor, Twig between Panitom. But the defense here for the Levi's, while they're going to take a lot of damage, admitting burning 4 minutes of time is hard to do, but I think they have a comp that can try to do it.
Still no Fear No Evil. Halfway to returning here from Twig. Wondered if the Leviathans would try to force the issue a bit more, knowing that ultimate is down, but no. It's Variety now, pushing things forward. Relics used by Sheento, as Centaurus has found a mountain of damage. We have officially reached that point for Netrioid as well. You're looking at the carries scaling into the late game. Zapman, of course, more auto attack, burn-centric, if a frontliner initiates. But Gore, Centaurus plus poke damage enough to force Sheento back, to force Zapman back. And great playing around the carries of the Camelot Kings.
Yeah, you want to talk about depth of competitive pool? There's a reason Netrioid has had to have this Chiron banned from him and like no other team. It's just because the way they play it, the way that it works with them is just different in comparison to a lot of these others. And it's what we saw, right? We saw it whiff around the Fire Giant. Netrioid was in a completely different zip code while he tried to get some of that damage out there. But then we see the success around the Phoenix, which is long away, shots from Centaurus, does a lot of damage, allows a masterful shot to come through. You get huge chunks that are burned because of your build, and then follow up with decent damage from masterful shot and a slow that's now being applied to 2, 3, 4 people. It just makes it so difficult to try and fight into them. And in that case, it's all you need to be able to push them back. You get just enough people low on the Leviathans. They have to give up a Phoenix if they want to stay alive. And now, while it's not an impossible defense, it's a difficult one, right? Admittedly, best Phoenix that you could have lost there because it's the one on the right-hand side. You can contest a Fire Giant when it inevitably respawns. And at this point, it is just, can you buy a minute, right? Can you buy another minute of gameplay for yourselves? Can you defend long enough that this EFG disappears? Can you contend long enough that they aren't able to get into the Titan room? And just stay alive, right? If anybody dies in the next minute while the FG is up, then it's a Phoenix. But even in the minute after that, then it's just another Fire Giant for the Kings. You've got a long way to go if you're the Leviathans, especially map state-wise. But it all has to start right here.
We're officially at the point where, well, we've been well past the point where experience doesn't really matter. Gold, while still important, not majorly impactful, but still burns down Sheento, who's got to flicker away. The enhanced Fire Giant, the big differentiator. And a good pushback from the Leviathans, but they have lost 80% of their mid lane Phoenix's health. Could be a split here. Netrioid can send some damage towards left. Instead, all 5 Kings funneling their way into the mid Phoenix. And a back off from the Leviathans. They'll choose not to fight.
Yeah, Twig has ult. Admittedly, everybody on Leviathans has. Everyone but Netrioid has it. Twig is maybe the one that I think is the eye-opener here, right? As if you have genetics tanking up the way that he's willing to, a blink, fear no evil, just like that.
Ronngyu down to half HP. CaptainTwig has found his targets, but the damage from the Kings not consistent enough to burn down Ronngyu just yet. Zapman still at half HP, hovering right around it. A bit of sustain for Zap will help out. Still has both relics, and just now Sheento's actives come back up. That's very important here as well. Panitom heads back, clears out the minions that are underneath the Titan. 1 or 2 remaining, but no big deal. My goodness. Ronngyu takes a little chunk of damage prior to jumping forward. That was a risky moment. But the Fire Giant drops off of the Camelot Kings. 2 Phoenixes down in the base of the Atlantis Leviathans. The left side still up. So as far as contesting the next one, Gore, far from worst case scenario for the Atlantis Leviathans dealing with those fire waves.
And look, for a while there, it was easy to say, like, hey, 3 Phoenixes down. Some of the rarest comebacks in SMITE come from this. And then Zapman happened in the last couple of years, and that number has shot up dramatically for a lot of these teams, specifically there. I believe SK, but really PK did it a lot during their Worlds run. And so definitely a lot, I think, kind of weighing for the Leviathans.
Yeah, Leviathans
like you said,
didn't really need to during their Worlds run. Huh?
No, they didn't. They just kind of won, and they won pretty hard at that.
Yeah.
But now, look, I mean, you're maintaining right side. Phoenix is going to respawn. Fire minions for that's going to be pretty easy to deal with. They should have someone throw some damage at that wave, otherwise it will get there. And it might only be a couple of minions. It might not kill the Phoenix again, but it's definitely going to be something to worry about. The problem is now that you definitely have to have someone defending in mid if you want that thing to come back, or if you don't want your Titan to take any unnecessary damage. And so when the Fire Giant comes up, I mean, it's an easy positioning for the Kings. And it just comes down to engage. Blink's about to come back up for Twig. Twig's got ult. Relics down for Ronngyu, and pretty much Ronngyu alone. Genetics has dropped the Bracer. So that'll be interesting to see how this goes, especially with the Vision fight.
I mean, it writes itself, right? Somebody's going to get picked. Panitom nearly dies. Aegis buys a little bit of time and maybe Panitom's life. But Panitom has got to leave anyway. He's got to back off. Can deal with some fire minions in mid, maybe. Leviathan's still around, though. Transformation out of Ronngyu on the back line. Keep your eyes on the Fafnir and the carries of the Leviathans. Jarcorrr also burnt through. There is simply too much shred from the Camelot Kings, but the Fire Giant still stands at 100% HP.
And again, this is going to be an awkward dance. I don't think the Kings can pull it confidently for a Fire Giant unless they get a kill. But they don't have the best engage yet. Net doesn't have his ult Twig, again, is where I look at. Variety has kind of been forcing engagements anyway. Twig is going to go for something. The blink doesn't go off, though.
Oh, it has to use the beads, and in fact, Twig jumps out. We haven't seen Piercing Moonlight used aggressively in like 20 minutes, but we have seen Fear No Evils hit their target. Panitom, tired of waiting though, has found damage onto BigManTingz, but look at Zapman and Ronngyu being transferred back by Variety. One kill, it's a bloodbath, but Panitom wants to do more, has found the damage, found the return kill, but ends up being a 2-for-1. Maybe the bloodiest team fight we've had in 40 minutes of gameplay.
And maybe the only one that we've actually gotten to see it feel like a 5-on-5 and not just someone getting picked towards the end. Look, Scarab's Blessing, this has been a dramatic problem, I think, for a lot of teams to deal with. This Khepri, just being able to res someone, it causes the shape of a team fight to change. We get to see it there, and then you get to chase them in, you get to deal that damage. But what for? At the end of the day, you still only kill the Khepri, and you lose 2 people in the process. You lose another EFG in the process. And it feels like something that the Kings have been more than happy to draft. A lot of these teams have been more than happy to draft. Unfortunately for the Leviathans here, well, it's not the end-all, be-all. It's not the thing that's winning you games. It is, unfortunately, sometimes the thing that's losing you games. Yeah. Is seeing that Khepri on the other side. Good engage, I think, from everybody. Twig didn't get the blink off, but still able to disengage, get a decent Fear No Evil, good damage from everybody on the side of the Kings just to make sure that they get it. And yeah, Panitom goes in and gets the kill, but costs him his life to do so.
Yeah.
It's just one of those moments that for the Leviathans, at this point you are playing to keep your Phoenixes alive, and you've successfully done that, but you are not in a position where you are controlling this game. You're playing whatever the Kings want you to play, and that's how your defense is going to have to be lined up.
Well, you're looking at relic upgrades as the big gold differentiator at this point, and then the consumables, power potions, things like that.
A butt ton of sentry wards if you're the Kings.
That's right. No ward goes unseen if you're the Camelot Kings. And this has been the turnaround that the Kings fans were hoping for. Again, I mean, Masterclass is an aggressive way of wording it, hyperbolic, if you will, but a very good display of macro game from the Camelot Kings. To remember, they were 2,000 gold down or so earlier on in the game. It really was the Pyromancer and the Fury that they both got like 20 minutes ago. Kind of brought the gold lead back, and from then they've just kind of been dragging the Leviathans around the map. Hasn't felt like these big team fights they've needed to win. Like I said, like 3 kills is the bloodiest team fight we've gotten in the last couple of games. The Kings have just been able to dictate where the Leviathans are and then filled the space and taken the objective where the Leviathans are now not, and they're doing it again. They pull the Leviathans left. Now the Camelot Kings go right. And they'll take the Fury, or the Phoenix rather. And the Leviathans just won't be in range. This is just a positioning battle, and the Kings are winning it.
And that's just the glory of Enhanced Fire Giant, right? Like a regular Fire Giant play, you're not going to be able to do that anywhere near that easily. Weekend Phoenix, you walk in, it's 3 autos. It's not something to sweat about. So I like the way that the Kings play that, because they can do it again in mid if they really want it.
Ronngyu stunned out. Sheento, oh, he might die here, and he will. CaptainTwig has found the opening kill. The mid lane Phoenix gone. Variety, though, takes big return damage, but there's a Scarab Blessing awaiting, and the frontliner gets a free escape ticket from his support. Jarcorr's got to head back to the fountain. Ronngyu not happy with the way that this game has gone, but has to be satisfied now. The Camelot Kings have lost 2, or they've gotten 2.
And now, it's just this weird position to be in. You've got 5 ready to walk into the Titan room. But can you really do it? I mean, well, look, she does dead. Zap deals decent damage. I don't know that there's too much to worry about, though. The strength that you have, the flexibility you have. Yeah, you're missing a couple of ultimates. A real good engage from the Kings lacking. But all they need is a couple of minions, and that should be the go button.
Yeah, Leviathans need a miracle here, but a game 3 looms large. The Camelot Kings, the Macro Kings, and the regular phase Kings are not ready to be out of this tournament just yet, and we will go to a game 3, Kings versus Leviathans.
What a way to kick off Friday, man. To come in, get a good win from the Leviathans in game number 1, but I think an important win here from the Kings, mainly because they have done a really good job, I think, showcasing that they can deal with engage, even if it's lacking. I mean, early on in that game, things were not looking great for them. Farm was a little down. Your ults weren't really finding anything if you're Twig, to the point where Ronngyu just straight up walked away from a 3v1, and he's a tank. It just did not seem like something that was going to go in their favor, but slowly but surely, good engages. I think a lot of the call and response Leviathans tried to burn down Variety, and in Game 1, worked out well. Game 2, throw Scarab's Blessing on the Artio. Good luck, you're not going to kill him.
Yeah, don't worry. If you want to see the end of Game 3, you probably got like an hour before we get there. Game number 2 in the books. Camelot Kings even up this set. Game number 3 right after this.
Well, after a not-so-bloody 43-minute game, I believe that it was, the Camelot Kings come out on top of the Leviathans to tie the set. And for our first set of the day, this one goes the full distance. We had to wait, what was it, like 2 or 3 days in week number 1 of Masters to finally get a game number 3? And we get it first, front and center to start this one out. But again, still a little uncharacteristic out of the Camelot Kings there, Trelly, in this game. Didn't really get a whole lot of 5v5 action. It was mentioned, at least by the casters during it. I mean, we're 20-some-odd minutes into the game. No real major grouping. It's always a pick, and then it's a 5v4 or a 4v3. But once we finally got that 5v5 around Fire Giant, that's when we see the Camelot Kings pull out ahead and be able to bring home the dub.
Yeah, I think it's just, quarterfinals, elimination time, you lose, you're out, so the teams are playing a little bit more reserved. The Camelot Kings, they weren't about to get 2-0'd in their first game of the quarterfinals, right? So they wanted to make sure they came out swinging. They sort of had I like the strategy they were going for, right? Where Variety would get to the back line, hit a stun, and then immediately Netrioid was pumping out the Centaurus damage from such a distance, making sure to poke down these targets. And then, of course, CaptainTwig on this Batz was hitting consistent Fear No Evil, chaining their CC so well. And then plays like this, abduct into the Fear No Evil, making sure there's no chance for Ronngyu to go into that Draconic transformation. They're just making sure to get the max value they could out of their CC. And, the Leviathans, they were holding on, but once the Kings got to this late game portion, they were able to, get their objectives and run through.
Yeah, I mean, this is, again, when we are 40 minutes into a game, looking up and seeing, a 16k goal differential doesn't really matter all that much. It's like an elixir maybe for one of your carries, a red potion there. So then it just comes down to that team fight, and it's hard to ever argue against the Hunbats for your team fight phase. I mean, that one god alone provides so much CC through that Fear No Evil, and sure, even though, again, a low kill count game, I believe final tally at the end of that one was 8-3, which is definitely not something to go home and celebrate, like, man, we had such a bloody 40 kill game to get to this point. Very, very calm, very kind of a calculated style of play, and very cautious, I think, is the way that you put it there, because yeah, it's single elimination for this bracket. You lose one set, it's not like, oh, we lose a set, we'll go down and face another team and lose and then come back up for another. This is your one chance for both these teams to move into the semifinals days, and definitely taking some extra caution in these first couple games.
Yeah, I think you got to imagine every play call is met with some hesitation, right? And that's not a situation, it's not necessarily a bad thing. Usually it's like, okay, let's go for this, and then it's done. But in a situation like this, I imagine the calls are, can we do fire here? Can we pull Gold Fury instead of let's go Gold, let's attack this? It's more so like, can we now? Let's just go for farm, right? Any play that's gonna create too much of a risk, I don't think it's gonna be go for before like 20 minutes, as we've seen. It's more so like we're going for ganks and picks, and if it doesn't happen, we're just backing off and continuing to our farm. We're not going for these risky early Gold Furies anymore. That's not the style of play that I'm expecting to see as this tournament goes on. Sure, it could be a play style from one of these teams bringing out, but right now the Kings and the Leviathans, they are playing extremely calculated, and neither one of these teams want to make an early mistake.
Yeah, thinking about it, I think between games 1 and 2, probably the combined kill count hasn't even hit like 20 yet. I think we're still within the teens as far as that one is concerned. So we're definitely not getting a whole lot of kills, but definitely a lot of play on map, which is something that the Kings have specialized in throughout the entirety of Season 9. Even back in Season 8, we were talking about their map play. But it's going to take more than map play to win this one. Who's going to take Game 3? It's going to have to all start, at least in the picks and bans for this third game. Leviathans, once again, the first pick option. They've been first pick all 3 games in this set so far. And for them, at least for now, not going to change up any of their bans. It will be that E set, and then the opposite side, Dodgy, the first ban for the Kings this time, holding out on the Lancelot.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that means that they're just switching up the order, or it could mean that Lancelot is getting through. It just really depends on who the banner is. Maybe it's just, I want to ban Dodgy first. It could be something like that. But the Chiron is going to be taken away. So Netrioid is not going to get that long-range artillery style of, I was going to say mage. That's not a hunter in the back line there. It might as well be at that point, right? You're doing mage levels of burst from a distance. That's sort of, that sort of play style. And still was able to crit for like 500-600 with that fail, not just one crit item. That's all it really took when you build that much power. So I understand when the Leviathans want to take that away. Very difficult to try and match up with that, distance. You can't close that gap without getting half health. So like, why even step up 2 objectives, things like that. So I think the Chiron and the East are just things that Leviathans don't want to deal with. Notably, there's been a lot of sort of counter bans coming through in this set, right? Where it started out with just, okay, baseline bans. Okay, and then like, oh, we don't want the Nemesis. Oh, we don't want to deal with the Fafnir, actually, from the Camelot Kings. So not going to let Ronngyu go back to that. It seemed like they had the answer for it last game, which was a ton of CC, but maybe thinking, we're not going to be able to get the Khepri and the Hunbats this time, or we just don't want to deal with the amount of shred the Leviathans had. So Ronngyu is going to have to switch up that support pick as well.
Ronngyu and the Leviathans have been banning Yemoja in that third slot, so they don't want to play it. They don't want to give it over to Genetics, but now I wonder if the Leviathans maybe keep that one open and then try and force, maybe an awkward ban out of the Camelot Kings. Maybe they have to ban the Khepri if the emoji gets left open. Maybe they have to ban the emoji themselves if it gets left open. A lot of mind games, at least with this third game's banning phase so far. As you mentioned, with that Fafnir and the Dodgy, the Lancelot notably still open if Variety wants to go back to that. He's found a lot of success on that god in the solo lane. For the Leviathans, I'm not sure exactly how like top tier that Lancelot is that you want to first pick him away from the Kings if he does get left open. But I'm curious as to where these final two bans will be allocated, Charlie.
I would be surprised if Cupid made it through. That's the one pick that I think would really shock me. The Lancelot I could see being left through in a game 3 situation. The Khepri will be taken away. The Leviathans are, you know what, they're like, it was a fluke. Game number 1, we dealt with it. This time around, we did not like that Khepri pick, so they are taking that away. Now the Kings have an awkward situation here. Do you want to take away, the Nemesis? Do you want to take away the Lancelot? The Cupid is still available if that's something that you don't want to deal with.
That's a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot, but
That's a lot. And Yemoja too.
Yeah, and the Yemoja stuff, but you are in a good position in the sense of you give one of those up and you get 2. So if the Leviathans are going to grab, the Yemoja first pick or the Cupid first pick, you're able to grab the 2 that you do want. And it looks like Yemoja is what they're going to put the most stock in. Ronngyu on Yemoja is not going to happen this game. I tend to agree. I think that's one of those picks that I can see where the mindset there was from the Camelot Kings. And now the Leviathans, they're not immediately locking that Cupid. They're not immediately locking that Lancelot. And Nemesis is open, I think. So that is something that I can say. Out of those 2, I'd say take your pick between Nem and Lancelot and grab the Cupid now. That's what I would do because you get your choice out of, hey, do we want to throw this in solo, jungle, whatever. You still have 2 good options in that slot.
So now it is back to the Leviathans for what they want to grab for first pick. These last 2 bans have kept us on the edge of our seats, and I imagine this first pick is going to be the same thing.
For a champion.
But it will be Lancelot picked up, so not going to give this one over to Variety or the Camelot Kings. Even if he does go over to CaptainTwig, of course, Lancelot can still be played in the jungle. We've just seen the most success out of him when thrown in that solo lane. Immediately right after, the Kings will answer with a Cupid of their own. As you mentioned, Nemesis is still available if CaptainTwig wants to go for there. Potentially a support pick as well for Genetics if he wants to grab something out now, because otherwise, if we go these first 6 picks, Trelly, there's going to be a lot of potential support bans taken out there. Also, King Arthur Artio still available, so lots to really dissect and go through with these 2 drafts so far.
Yeah, this is not an easy, this is open, lock it, and not think about anything else. I did think this was about what we'd see, right? One team takes one of those 3, and the other team gets the other 2. However, if the Leviathans grabbed that Cupid, it could have easily been Lancelot and M locked in, and that would have been kind of spooky. So I think I see the mind games that were played here. Lancelot's going to have a decent matchup into the Nem, the cripple field, as well as just being able to knock up that shield. All things that I think will, the Leviathans will appreciate just in the jungle matchup. If you are throwing it over to solo, there is some ambiguity there, so we'll hold on to that. But now you're in a situation, like you said, where are we grabbing a support pick in Merlin, as the Leviathans have been doing throughout this set? Looks like not going to be the case. They're going to grab Artio, and then usually it was Merlin in this slot. And it looks like it's actually going to be Cabrakan. If this holds true to what the set's been, that could be Sheento's pick, as we've seen him play the Cabrakan mid before. Yeah, but in elimination time, I don't know if Sheento goes towards the Cabrakan. We'll have to hold on to that one. And now it's the Camelot Kings' turn to rebuttal.
And with that Artio picked up, that does mean Lancelot likely slotted over towards the jungle,
right.
Unless, again, we see something really weird for one of these picks going somewhere odd. But this time the Merlin will not go to the Leviathans. This one will now go over to the Camelot Kings, making sure to pick that one up for BMT. And he's had success on that pick in the past as well. So now the ban phase should be really interesting. Whether this Cabrakan is going to Sheento and mid, undetermined at the moment. But we know that it has flexibility towards the support, towards jungle, towards solo. If it's not mid, likely support, considering Artio Lancelot already locked in, probably for that jungle support, at least in that regard. So this is a very curious banning phase now, Trelly.
Yeah, the Cabrakan just gets so much value up into Nemesis. You're able to, the slow immunity and the stuns are going to be so useful, as well as into the Cupid cripple field. Your slow immunity is going to be so potent as well. I'm good with Cabrakan wherever, honestly. At this point, one of the highest banned characters for quite some time, and now it's just been sitting, like, he's been getting through because, there's other things to prioritize. Cabrakan is a very safe grab there. So we'll have to see, as you said, where that Cabrakan does end up going. At the moment, it does seem like it's in support. I do think that Sheento could certainly take it, but it's been played to mixed success. And it's time, this is go big or go home, quite literally. So we'll have to see if that is the case. A lot of Guardian bans for the Leviathans. They took away the Ymir. They took away the Sobek as well. They don't want to deal with any sort of early game pressure, as well as just Hell and Tiamat taken away from the Kings. So they don't think that's going to be a mid lane Cabrakan, and I think I'm in the same boat.
Potentially so. So then that leaves open the question of what is left for genetics, what is left for variety in that solo lane. So Xingqian immediately comes to mind maybe for some pickups. And we'll get picked up for the Camelot Kings, so at least I don't have to maybe harbor too much on there. King Arthur still up for solo lane for how popular he's been. He's made it all the way through. Cucullin as well, if you want to go towards budget King Arthur, quote-unquote, there. Tyr, if variety is feeling spicy, trying to go back to game number 1, though with the mixed success that it had over in game 1, maybe not so. So now for the Leviathans, we'll finally get our answers to exactly where this Cabrakan is going. And it will be support role as Baba Yaga drafted up. Something that we saw exclusively only with the EUSCC mid laners, Charlie. But how you feeling about Baba? This game 1 was, 35 minutes, and we had like a 43-minute game number 2. Feels like it's a perfect time to pick up a Baba.
Yeah, Baba, I think, does crazy damage, usually sits pretty safe in lane depending on the matchup. Up into the Nemesis, it's going to be a little tricky. You want to make sure that you get some peel from your team, because when you go into the house, you're just eating auto attacks for free. But I think Baba, always solid if the game goes late. If you're waiting for that late game portion, Baba Yaga should be pretty solid. We see the Horus, and, genetics has been playing this Horus for quite some time. I think both of these picks, the Xingqian and the Horus, have some flexibility, but for my money, variety takes that Xingqian into solo, and then genetics pilots this team, no pun intended, on the Horus. I mean, he will quite literally be able to just lift them off and fly them wherever they need to be. I mean, really made his name when he first came into the SPL on this Horus pick. I think one of the main reasons the pick got nerfed so hard to the skies, he was able to zoom you around for a bit. Now a little bit slower still, though. Crazy early pressure. It's going to be setting up like Fracture into Heart Bomb. That's going to be a kill lane. You got to make sure that your positioning is top tier. You're looking at a Cabrakan and an Artemis. 2 picks that could definitely feel the brunt of that CC. You got to watch out for that. And always got to be looking, wherever that ult's going to be coming, to the skies. You have to be warding and make sure, hey, in a Phoenix Seed situation, we've seen it before. You take a full wave of minions, completely the opposite side, that bird goes down.
Yeah, so definitely for the Atlantis Leviathans, making sure to keep tabs and keep eyes on genetics more than anybody to see where he's going to go with these Horus ultimates. Does he bring back his plays? I mean, you go back, as you said, his debut into the SPL on the E-United days. Immediately, like the very next patch, we saw this guy got nerfed just because of how well genetics was able to play this guy and really exploit the benefits that he has in that specific role there. So you're talking about a very heavy kill lane, at least for the Camelot Kings. Is there a spot for the Atlantis Leviathans to maybe try and alleviate some of that pressure in duo?
Yeah, I do think the Panitom on this Lancelot is going to be able to get a ton of value, just because the cripple field's going to be so impactful, right? There's a lot of characters here that have some dashes, not too much CC immunity, Cupid, Nem, Merlin. They're all going to feel the brunt of that and have to use some relics if you want to try and to escape. And if that's the case, you're looking at an Artio, a Cabrakan, Artemis. Like, if beads are down, I think the Leviathan's comp is going to flourish. So definitely have some avenues to get active in the early, and I think that's exactly where Lancelot can succeed. We've seen the damage that Lancelot can do in the late game, of course, but he's no shy at early fighting. Once you get level 5, you get to hop off the horse, use that jousting field, get back on the horse. The engages can be absurd. So I think both of these teams are probably pretty happy with the drafts that they have.
We've seen the damage output that Lancelot can do from solo lane. We haven't really got to see the true massive burst out of the jungle just quite yet. We've seen a couple of hints here and there. So I'm excited to see what Lancelot's going to be able to do in the jungle, at least over for Panitom on the Leviathans. They're going to need to make their comeback win here. Who's going to make it on to the second day of plan? Will it be the Leviathans? Will it be the Camelot Kings? Let's jump into game 3 to find out.
1/4 final, and already we got a best of 3. And Gore, maybe you can help me. Is this a mustache or a mouth?
That's a mouth.
Got it. Not a mustache. I thought we were mustache pals.
Nah, I think he could, like, if it was a little wider, it could be more mustachy, but it's too up.
W for wide.
For wide mustache?
Yeah, I don't know.
Wide shot, wide what?
I don't know, Gore. You said if it's a little wider, W for what?
Okay, yeah.
It tracks,
you lost
Gore.
me on that one.
It tracks. Stop. Leviathans Kings Game 3 and Jithans working the observer for us. As Dolson and Gore one more time
Oh, man.
together for the Leviathans and the Camelot Kings, Gore, a heavyweight Game 3.
Chat, from now, at least for this game, if there's something that goes wrong, you can do exclamation point blame Jithans.
They do that anyway.
Yeah, but now it's like legit. Like they got a good reason for it. Jithans is definitely upset I just said that. Also, wish him a happy birthday. He's more upset I said that.
It is his birthday today, so blame him and wish him both a happy birthday.
Is it rude to blame someone for something on their birthday? Unless it's like a good time.
I think only if it's Jithans, it's okay.
Okay.
I blame you for being such a lovable and likable person on your birthday, Gore. That
Thank
counts
you.
for something, right? Anyway, Game 3 between the Leviathans and the Kings, and a knockout Game 3 to avoid dropping out of SMITE Summer Masters entirely. You gotta win Game 3 here. And Gore, you know, Games 1 and 2, pacing be what it is. You're getting to the 20, 30-minute marks. Only a couple of kills for either of these teams. Late game team fighting, late game shot calling, positioning has been the big differentiator in Games 1 and 2.
I'm interested to see if either the, well, there's two ways this game goes, and I was going to say maybe the pace steps up, and with this Cupid, it seems like the answer to that is yes.
Oh, Zapman avoids a nice chunk of damage on the back end. So pressure from a Cupid is what it is already, but then you add that with a Horus and Genetics should be a fun lane here for the Kings.
Yeah, stealing the note that Ro mentioned at, I believe, last Masters, where it's just, you know, when you have Horus, whether it's over here in the support role or what we had seen at the time and what he was pushing for was the solo lane, but you're still warrior scaling early on, right? Like, you're still a warrior. You've got a good stun, good knock up. Eventually, you're going to have that heal in your kit as well. This lane feels like it's going to be oppressive because of that amount of damage output. And then a heart bomb, you know, Cupid with the recent buffs, like, just controls the lane. If Ronngyu is literally anywhere that isn't inside the tower there, that's just a kill for the Kings. And so I think that this is what I wanted to see, right? What kind of pace are we going to set for game number 3? Because the last couple have been pretty long, so it makes sense that this one, usually game 3s are where things slow down. But if you're already going that slow, do you speed up? Probably not. But if they can find some pressure, I think that'll give an opening for the Kings to at least kick things off a little bit better than they did game 2.
Ronngyu has been just eating these hard bombs, and he'll eat the last one. A first blood to Netrioid and Genetics over in the duo lane. Gore, the pressure was just mounting. It seemed like a matter of time. But none of the heart bombs missing, all of it connecting for some damage. And the opposite of what you want your Cabrakan to be doing in the first 3 levels is dying. It's exactly what's happened here. Great start to the Kings.
Yeah, not often we talk about the Cabrakan in the lane being the one that's getting aggressed on, right? I think Genetics is just playing this really well. And again, it kind of ruins what Ronngyu needs to be able to do. Ronngyu, when you're Cabrakan, you have to get in melee range. You have to get close. You want to be in that fight. Horus stuns you, makes sure that your prots are shred, knocks you up, keeps you in place. Cupid just hits you with a heart bomb and then follows up with autos. Like, it's not like there's a complicated job on the other side, and it kind of makes it you know, like we just saw, very difficult to step up and even be proactive. I mean, good luck even trying to get a Trimmers off at that point. And the same thing can be said for Zap, right? This Artemis, we talk about how it's a good, I want to say like quote-unquote counter pick, maybe not exactly like a direct counter, but has a good matchup into Cupid just because of this slow immunity that she has off of her stem. Doesn't necessarily matter if you're getting stunned or knocked up by a Horus, right? You don't have the same getaway potential that you would otherwise. So this entire lane for the Leviathans just feels like no matter what, the Kings are going to be able to control it. While Genetics is here, once Genetics leaves and it's just Netrioid and Zap, it might balance out a little bit more to be kind of back and forth between the two. But for now, Genetics is definitely the one who can kind of control things. As long as that mana bar is full and the cooldowns are close to 0.
Twig walk towards Sheento here, but the nice cauldron get its way out. Arcane stance from BigManTingz. Arcane stance.
Void.
Void sounds cooler anyway, Gore.
Void's a cool style of magic.
It is.
Arcane is like magic.
That's just
Yeah, like I'm not rolling an Arcana check. Like,
That's right.
I'm throwing a Void ability out.
Igor, I'll defend. I'll fight this battle with you to the end of time.
We're making a stance against the game itself.
And you know what's great? We're the only ones who got mics. We can talk about it. We can say our piece and move on. No, BigManTingz able to clear out the waves just fine over in mid, and CaptainTwig puts a little pressure towards Sheento in the cauldron. No, it's a walk, Gore. It's not a cauldron. It's something else.
Waddle? What does a cauldron do?
No, it's not a cauldron as like a big bowl. It's like a wok. Like we were getting sassed at because we were calling it void and not arcane.
Yeah.
It is literally a cauldron, but I was joking and saying it wasn't a cauldron. It's a wok. If we're being technical, but it is actually a cauldron. Anyway, Sheento is able to stay safe over.
I'm glad you saved that one because I had no clue what to do with it.
Yeah, it was a bad bit anyway. That one's on me.
The best bits are the ones where you have to spend the next like 2 minutes explaining what the bit of it was.
Yeah, that's too many of mine. That is the majority of my bits, unfortunately. Sheento, cauldron in hand, will stay safe in mid, which is important on this Baba Yaga. You want to be able to stack up. Going to get those Warlock staff stacks pretty early. Wonder how heavily into stacking Sheento does want to go, though. Chiron's coin usually a pretty popular option. We've also seen Baba Yagas straight up go Warlocks into a standard bursty mage build after the fact. Wonder how heavily Sheento will stick with stacking or try to smooth out some of that power curve.
It's definitely going to be a weird balance because, you know, last week, if you were paying attention on Twitter, a lot of the EU players for the SCC were rushing the Chiron's coin. And there were a few SBL players, but notably Mike was just saying, stop doing this, it's just worse for you. Yeah. And it's that question of, like, is this an item, you know, admittedly, as the rush, maybe not as worthwhile early on compared to some others, but it isn't one that's worth picking up just because you know you're going to get your stacks. That one's going to be maybe a little more debatable, I think, in the grand scheme of the conversation. I think no matter what, you're still looking at the exact same style of mid laner towards the late game, which is, hey, Baba Yaga doing a lot of damage, trying to kill off anybody and everybody, like weird shaped abilities that then either give you extra length or kind of change the way that you need to balance out a team fight. It's much more difficult to dodge an oval because who else is throwing an oval out in Smite? It's a very like niche matchup, and I think that it's going to be something that the Leviathans are going to be able to kind of capitalize on. Late game Sheento damage should be through the roof.
Yeah, you would hope, and Gore, if games 1 and 2 are any indicator.
Yeah, we're getting the late game.
Yeah, we're getting there eventually. And so we're going to have this real interesting mage battle late in the game, because Merlin, much the same, right? Book of Thoth start for BigManTingz, get that nice and stacked up. Should have objective shred later on with big burst damage from Sheento, and then maybe a bit more sustained damage with Home Sweet Home and that ultimate, and the fire bolts that it throws out a bit later on. Should be a lot of fun to watch Sheento and BigManTingz scale up and battle it out later on into the game. So, are we going to have anything to say about the early game then is the question. Panitom and CaptainTwig are the ones who have to answer it. Nemesis, Golden Blade, Blink, absolutely an opportunity. And then yes for Lancelot as well, where you get this full damage Lancelot style build in Gore. We have seen it find early impacts, mid-game impacts. Excited to see what Panitom can get done. I'm
really, I think, excited not only to see how hands-on he can get, but also like the use of the ults and specifically the cripple field that it can provide. Very similar to like Netrioid, right? A big Fields of Love can slow things down and change things for your team. I think you can turn that around the other way.
Netrioid's got to use the beads because Tusky dropped by Zapman. That's a dash forward, and why? Because Genetics is here. Fantastic dodge from Zapman. Stays away from the knockup. And Netrioid with the re-aggression won't hit pay dirt. Looked like Panitom considering a re-gank towards left, but he will gallop away as long as he is mounted up on Bubbles, I think is what we named his horse.
Who?
I think during one of the patch notes shows we said that Lancelot's horse is named Bubbles.
Okay.
I am almost certain of that.
I'll accept it.
Is ganked by CaptainTwig this time, but nice burst sustain up. And this is the story of game 2 for Twig. Plenty of attempts at ganks, not many of them successful, but at least the mental game, burning of the beads, things like that, always going to benefit the Kings.
Yeah, and honestly, I think that the way things are going, and specifically the way that they're playing this, is really solid to their draft, right? Where do they have the most pressure? They have it in duo, so they're going to put pressure on duo, and whether or not it results in kills, they get the first blood, they feel great there. you don't need too much after that, right? You kind of exerted the dominance over there that was necessary. And then you mentioned it, but like as the game goes on, Horus, Cupid, not only do they have this early pressure, they translate beautifully into late game gods. Merlin, much more higher burn potential, higher damage output with a couple more items, so we're going to see him come online and be able to be hands-on. Same thing for Nemesis, though.
Could it be an early game team fight? Yes, it is. Panitom has dropped the ult, and it's a double washing machine out of the Xing Chen and Variety the one to pick up the first kill in this fight, but it's immediately answered back. The Leviathans drop the solo laner, and so tanks down on either side.
And just, I mean, look, a great ult with just shy of perfect follow-up, right? A little more damage that gets thrown in there. Maybe Variety is the lead, and maybe still dies, but gets 2 kills for his team, whether he picks them up or not. Still able to get 1 for 1, right? Like you said, Ronngyu, at this point, actually a not as worthwhile of a kill just because Variety has kept level parity with Jarcorrr, but at the same time, keeping him shut down feels pretty solid. Yeah. With a 2-level deficit, you feel, I think, that impact really kind of permeating these fights. This Cabrakan just has not been allowed to anything. I mean, nowhere have I been looking at the plays and thought, okay, there's the Cabrakan really setting things up. The walls have been okay, and we'll see whether or not that can maybe change some stuff. But ideally, I mean, strength is what we're going to be looking for. Maybe good walls, but really trying to just farm up, maybe catch up. And again, it goes into some of these late game compositions. If the Kings are going to play, I think, very powerful over here early on, then you've got to be able to step up and match. And again, Baba Yaga at this point, maybe not going to be the most outstanding amounts of damage and has gone deep into the stacking items, as you had mentioned earlier, and is doubling down on it, which, with your passive, hell yeah, do it. It is going to be a problem, though, just because, again, for the Leviathans, it feels like you are kind of staying here for a while, right? You're banking on this one being 30+. And if they can make it there, they're still going to have all of those strengths we highlighted earlier. You know, experience, as I was talking about it now, doesn't really matter if you're 30 minutes into the game unless someone has somehow failingly fallen super far behind, in which case, then it could make a difference. But yeah, that we'll see.
The arc is tossed back by Variety. Twig holding on to his ultimate. Maybe not fully convinced that there was enough damage either way. Genetics had rotated over, and a good answer back from the Leviathans makes 3 versus 3 over on right. It's going to be a long burn of a fight if we do end up seeing a full initiation, but just some poking and prodding from either side. The tankiness and sustain of the Leviathans able to outlast the tankiness and the sustain of the Camelot Kings.
This is where things, I mean, sustain specifically is maybe going to make the bigger difference. Right now, you know, you're getting a lot of, like, I'm going to say, like, battle mage-esque healing from the Artio, right? It's going to be happening during the combat, things like that. Horus is going to have to think a little bit more about it, but I think Genetics is going to be able to apply a nice big splash heal to his team around him. And so that's going to be, like you said, kind of an interesting dynamic, I think, going into the late, because it's not like either of these teams are super sustain heavy.
Hello, out of nowhere, the Camelot Kings pulling the Gold Fury, and it'll just bounce back and forth between Netrioid and BigManTingz. That'll be a confirmed early objective from the Kings, and it's Netrioid and BigManTingz, plus a little Genetics at the end. That gets it done. Then the Kings want to maybe scrap in mid. Won't be anything there, but the objective-minded Kings able to step up, make a great play right at those power spikes here in Game 3.
And look, that's why all that ping pong in the break room is perfect practice, right? They made sure that that did not sit too long on any individual player to make sure that they were able to get the damage output without having to take too much in the process. No one on the Leviathans is responding to that, though. I mean, we saw it. There was no vision over there. The Kings had the sentry ward set up. Admittedly, it makes it easier for the Leviathans to make a call on the right-hand side of the map. You know that there's not going to be a trade out on the other side because you already lost it. But I like how proactive. I mean, the Kings are again, it maybe isn't the most actionable. It's not crazy team fights all the time, but they're playing the map just stronger than the Leviathans right now.
Well, look, razor-thin margins here. I mean, you're in a knockout Game 3, first quarterfinal of the day here in SMITE Summer Masters. Leviathans wanting to bounce back a bit of that gold lead, pull the pyro, but great response from the Camelot Kings to just show some face. And the Kings, as a matter of fact, could potentially pull it themselves. No, Twig was just hovering close by, drop some ward coverage, and end up backing themselves off. Been a very active game from CaptainTwig so far, despite just the one assist, has at least shown presence oftentimes over on the right side of the map. And along that line of thinking, Core, we have seen almost no presence. What, Zapman got ganked once by a World Weaver in game 1.
Yep.
I'm racking my brain to think of any other left side pressure that we've gotten so far here in this set.
Ronngyu.
A 1v1 Core. That's the pressure. The 1v1's the pressure. Zapman doesn't get stuck with the trap. Drops on a Netrioid, and Zapman finds the 1v1. I've willed it into existence. Zapman goes big, but Genetics here to repay the favor. Should have enough damage, but Zapman drops the trap, and Zapman gets out alive. Nice play from the Leviathans ADC.
That's the kind of experience you only get to see from someone who's been playing the game for a decade and is used to having 4 people gank his lane. There's no other way he's getting out of there. I mean, absolutely insane for him. And now they're going aggressive. Look, Rongyu's throwing up some good walls.
Still needs some more damage out of Sheento. Baba Yaga hasn't quite hit that point yet. Warlock Staff, Book of Thoth. Helpful, but tanky enough targets here for the Camelot Kings, where you're going to need a bit more later on in this game. So ultimate used by both Sheento and Ronngyu. Twig answers, so does Variety in kind. But I think that's a necessary moment, even though it's not a big tilt back as far as gold goes. Still a nice moment for the Leviathans and Zapman. Buy yourself an advantage somewhere on the map. You know, this Artemis now, the 1 level lead, matches the kill total of Netrioid. This next Fury maybe feels a bit more comfortable for the Leviathans now, but you got to be worried about the Pyromancer. It's pulled by the Kings, but burning slow.
I'm surprised after the last engagement that the Leviathans didn't at least try to pull it, see if they could get the Kings back into a fight. Now they're going to have to go back in, but sans ultimates, they do still have Sheento. A lot of damage to go into the fight.
Blink forward from Variety. That catches out Ronngyu, but maybe right where Ronngyu wants to be, though the double root down from Variety slows down the initiation from the Leviathans, but not slow enough. Panitom picks up a kill on a CaptainTwig. Pyromancer goes to the Kings in the meantime, but the 1 kill shifts back to the Leviathans. Weird juggling of engagement versus objective there for both teams.
The gold, at least, going towards the Kings there, so it feels a little bit better maybe in that regard. But Dave, at this point, the 2 games so far this set, whoever's had this lead early on in the game, it's the one that lost towards the late. Happened for the Kings in game 1, Leviathans in game 2. Now Kings are up.
Yep.
And so we'll see if they can maybe kind of maintain this. You know, it's the conversation long term. Objectives will outweigh single kills every single time.
Yep.
And so the Kings get the favorable trade there, although losing Twig specifically might not be what you want them, you know, more than anything. But it does give them that position. You know, Twig's going to have a reset, respawn, be able to get the buffs, you know, not too terribly far behind. Buys time on you know, beads, blink, things like that to maybe set up for this next Fury. And it comes back to the same conversation. You know, Baba Yaga has a lot of bursts, but I wouldn't necessarily describe anything in that kit as like the best secure. Maybe in this game, but not in the entirety of SMITE. And so something I think that is going to have to be kind of balanced out. The Kings this time have the favorable burn. They've got a Cupid. They've got the Nemesis, so a lot of auto attackers. They've got the Merlin. It feels like they're going to be able to pick up objectives similar to what we saw about 5 minutes ago.
Yeah.
But even faster if they decide to commit their mage to it as well and burn down maybe an Oni Fury, Pyromancer when it comes back up, but also Fire Giants in the future. So I think that's something that the Leviathans are going to have to be on top of the ward game. They're going to have to be on top of rotations. Otherwise, the Kings are going to be able to sneak away objectives pretty quickly.
You would think. And as we talk about the important carries starting to scale up, Gore, talking about Sheento, Baba Yaga, things like that. More damage, of course, will be online. Got to talk about the tankiness and where that's starting to evolve for both of these teams. Jarcorrr into the Spectral Armor as a bit of crit. And it is just a bit from the Camelot Kings, but wanting to prioritize that early is Jarcorrr. Go ahead and get that out of the way. And then Prots, health, mana, all that's going to feel good anyway. But some good physical protections early here from Jarcorrr. Should help out against Netrioid and Twig. And a little magical protection to BigManTingz as well. This Artio already going to be tough to deal with. We've already seen some good out of Variety as well. This solo lane battle really starting to get healthier and tankier here at the 18, 19, 20-minute mark.
Going to keep my eyes on Engage, I think, for the Kings. The last couple of games, and you know, I highlighted in game 1, Variety was a big portion of the Engage on the tier, and for some of those fights it went really well. Some, it was a late game tier just getting shredded, right?
Yeah.
Last game, Variety would jump in, and admittedly, Leviathans would turn their attention over towards the then, at the time, Artio. But Scarab's Blessing kind of alleviated some of that stress. And you've got, again, some healing that's into the team over here for Genetics and Netrioid that can maybe help him out. But Variety, if he jumps in this time around, more or less can be hung out to dry. So, like, that build, super tanky, doesn't necessarily scream like Zap's going to be able to burn through it. You don't have a Merlin on the other side anymore either, so I think that you're going to be kind of permitted to live a little bit longer. And Variety is, like, the best engage this team has. They've got others, right? Nemesis ult is going to be able to kick things off, good Fields of Love, things like that. But it does feel like a blink ult from Variety, especially if there's no beads on the other side, if they burned anybody prior to that. That's going to be what kicks off a lot of these engagements. So keeping your eyes on, like, the solo laner, especially over the next couple of fights where those end up, that'll be a huge deal for these teams.
I mean, Genetics, I think, could also play a pretty big role in some of that initiation gore. More for, like, moving the Kings. And think back to the Kings in Game 2 and how they were able to shift the Leviathans' positioning around just on the map and are going to force the Leviathans to reposition to the Fire Giant now because at the 20-minute mark, the Kings have pulled it. Ronngyu has done just heaps of damage to CaptainTwig. Firebolts from Home Sweet Home trying to chase down the Nemesis, but double dashes, healings, things like that. Speeding up Twig enough to get out alive. That was a risky FG call from the Camelot Kings and maybe a bit of a split mindset. Twig a bit left alone. Leviathan's able to answer nicely and keep the objective on the map.
At the same time, I kind of admire it. It's a vibe check, right? If we can get in here, we're going to burn this Fire Giant down. But if they respond, then yeah, we have to back off. But it does open up this conversation. A little bit of aggression from the Leviathans. If the Kings, well, now they won't be able to. But at the time, if they were able to maybe capitalize on that positioning, they could have tried to turn something around. First goal was keep Twig alive. Second goal, potentially find a fight. Right now, they still have the strength to do so, especially with the Leviathans just picking up a Fury on the other side, kind of like it's nothing.
Yeah, simple for the Atlantis Leviathans. And I was talking about Genetics a little bit. An interesting build path for Genetics here, where it's gone into the Magi's Revenge with that second item. So maybe Genetics feeling, all right, I'm going to be in there anyway. I'm gonna catch some instance of CC. And then suddenly we are going to run down whoever that might be. Maybe if you're repositioning, using your ult, things like that's kind of how Genetics wants to be playing anyway. Yeah. And then upgraded the relics. We've seen this style of build path now pretty consistently from support score. You get a couple of items online, usually Thebes, Mail of Renewal, something like that. Go ahead, get the relics online, and then go back to finishing off your build after the fact. And so Genetics in a really interesting but a pretty strong spot here on this forest.
Yeah, I won't be surprised that you just bought tier 1 of a cloak if that goes into like a Spirit Robe for some CCR as well. Because that, you know, the CCR plus having a bubble plus, and specifically the wording of Magi's Revenge, it's not just you, it's your team, your allies get that buff. It feels like it's going to be great because who's going to be on the front line and most susceptible to things like a Cabrakan stun? Genetics. Who's going to be the one that can capitalize on that, use that movement speed to potentially get an extra knock-up to find more CC for their own team? It's Genetics. So I really like kind of shifting that away. Instead of it being an Erendite Magi's Revenge build for Twig, throwing that over onto Genetics and letting him be the one that admittedly is kind of leading the way. Twig already has his way of close gap and chasing people down. Give a little bit of movement speed over there to Genetics. And I think that we can see, like you said, not just positioning shifts like we saw in game number 2, but just really good setup.
Sunder starts off this fight, and Jarcorrr takes all of the damage. That's just simple from the Camelot Kings. Now you've got a numbers advantage in a 5v4. Tusky drops out from Zapman, though. The CC good enough from the Leviathans to slow down the pacing of this fight. And CaptainTwig nearly gets burnt through. Panitom, he's on the case. And he's got the chase for CaptainTwig, but dismounted. And Twig will survive. Nice pick from the Camelot Kings.
No, Twig is still going to back, but even if they didn't need to there, you've got Netrioid and Genetics. Like, you're going to get to full health. It might take a cycle of an ability or two, but you're going to get back to full health. In any other circumstance, if they have to stay, that's a good fight for the Kings just because of how balanced out they're able to get it. Get a clean kill onto Jarcorrr, clean pick almost onto Ronngyu afterward. Just forcing them to feel awkward, like there's no true engage. It feels like for the Leviathans is going to go their way. And it goes to showcase once again, Bubble easily going to turn things around.
Whoa, what's happened in Netrioid? He's been jumped on by the Atlantis Leviathans, but how about that reinitiation from Variety? It's fantastic. Panitom has completed the backline dive, and at least Netrioid dies off as well, but the Leviathans have no more carries and no more jungler, and how about that team fight for the Camelot Kings? Fire Giant now pulled as 3 go down on the Levi's.
That's the second time Jarcorrr has had to, or sorry, Ronngyu has had to use these walls just to try and peel the Kings away. Not to engage, not to hold them in, just to keep them off of them for a second. And unfortunately, this time it comes after losing all 3 of your carries, a massive fight that is going to shift things in favor of the Kings. I mean, look, not just Fire Giant, even if you ignore that. Panitom completing that dive is the only option for a play that feels like it's going to work somewhat in your favor. I don't think there's getting out of there otherwise. So I like getting the kill, but that's just clean engage. I mean, Variety gets a pickup onto 2, and very easy at that. Their beads are on a synchronized timer, so Variety with that ult available is going to be able to do it again when they respawn here in a second. And when you get thrown back into a Merlin, man, I mean, come on, like, just forget about it. The damage that Tingz is able to output right there. It might not be top of the charts, but it doesn't matter. All of that has been converted into kills. And that's what matters most for the Kings. Look, you're going from very similar to the last couple of games, 20 minutes in, a very equal map state. First, Fire Giant's going to shake up a lot of that. Maybe we're not talking Phoenixes yet. I think you've got a good defense around those objectives for the Leviathans. But these tier 1s, not worth defending. Tier 2s, you could probably step up to if you're feeling confident as the Leviathans, but admittedly, with the way the last couple of fights have gone, I feel like maybe pumping the brakes, pulling back, especially looking at the relics. If the Kings decide to get aggressive on these tier 2s, you probably let them up.
Yep.
And try not to get picked. This could be absolutely awful. Yeah, Ronngyu has to use that move speed just to stay alive over here.
I mean, this is the Kings that was just missing in game 1. I would argue even missing in game 2 a bit. Yes, the Kings win game 2, but as far as consistent mid-game to early late game shot calling, team fighting, and pace pickup, took a bit to get there in game 2, but here in game 3, it's been the Kings returning back to, because we've talked about uncharacteristic games, right? Even in a win, even in a loss for the Kings and the Leviathans for that matter. This feels like how the Kings have just played Smite all year long, and maybe the most we've seen of that so far here in this set. Really good spot now to close out game 3 and move on and Smite Summer Masters, and I think the fans of the Kings will breathe a sigh of relief if this game does end up going to the Kings, especially in the fashion that they've been able to get it done. Pick-oriented, yes, but objective-oriented. Just shredding every ounce of golden experience off the map that they can. The Leviathans got to find those openings, though. You got to hope that Sheento can get a better initiation. Jarcorrr, Blink, Stun. You got 3 Blinks on your team. That's maybe got to be the opening. Catching out a target, sleep at the wheel a bit on the Camelot Kings.
This is also where things get, I think, even more awkward for the Leviathans, because not only are you kind of relying for the Kings to maybe make a little bit of a snoozer mistake, but also, like, where's your engage? Yeah, you know, like, I mean, you're equalized in levels, right? It's not necessarily coming from a deficit, but, like, if I'm Jarcorrr and I step forward, probably not going to go too well. I mean, that's a good stun, but is it going to change things?
It's the Blinks forward, and then Zapman hopefully following up with Tusky. Not there this time, but beads and shell off of Netrioid. Small win for the Atlantis Leviathans. But right back to burning down the tier 2 tower. Go the Camelot Kings and burning down Jarcorrr. At that rate, here's Panitom with the 3rd blink of the Leviathans, but where's Genetics going? Backwards with it to the skies. And just some damage from Sheento with the home sweet home. All the initiation has just bought time for the Camelot Kings to back up and reset.
Yeah, and I mean, look at the Kings. Like, the Leviathans are trying to fight, and the Kings, their health bars are virtually untouched. Like you said, relics on Netrioid get burned, but Zap uses Tusky. Tusky doesn't find anybody. Sheento throws out some firebolts, doesn't really connect with anybody. Panitom goes deep, and then has to retreat. You know, Jarcorrr blinks in, and then has to retreat. Like, there was no follow-up. There was no big play for them. And so it wasn't necessarily a lack of initiation. It was a lack of anything to do with the initiation.
Panitom galloping forward. Could be a trade back here as Variety is stunned, but tanky enough this late in the game. Xing Chen will be A-okay. So every single tower on the map gets taken by the Camelot Kings. And Gore, it's got to be just easy street, driver's street. Driver's street, that's not a real thing. Driver's seat for the Camelot Kings to close out game number 3. They're 10,000 gold ahead. And I think that tier 2 defense score, or lack thereof, on the left side of the map, really highlights the glaring issues that the Leviathans have now faced and are going to have to hope to remedy. Remember, one of those 4 kills is a solo kill from Zapman. They just don't have the same jump-in initiation that Variety and Genetics have been able to provide. Fields of Love from Netrioid is good follow-up.
Well, and you called it during the last one, right? Jarcorrr blinks forward, stuns 2 people, 3 are grouped up from the Kings, and you expect something to follow up there. And then nothing happens. And then Panitom is in, and he's alone. And then Sheento is in, and it's just a lot of individual fights from the Leviathans that did not feel like the team that we're used to seeing play together. Whereas for the Kings, I mean, it was picture perfect, right? Everybody's working together, well-oiled machine, feels the way that you expect them to after the last 10 weeks of play. Some team that is just going to play the map better than you, and then if they get into a fight, they're probably going to control the team fight a little bit stronger. And when it comes to engage, Variety, again, you blink forward. Let's say you pull all 5 pairs of beads, which would be nuts, but still. Even after that, there's more engage. Genetics has an engage. Netrioid, Fields of Love, Twig with his ult. Like, somebody is going to be able to find something on their side. And even if they don't, they're going to force a fight around a Fire Giant. They're going to start the objective and force you to make the awkward play. I think that's just something that, unfortunately for the Leviathans, they're falling into the trap of. They just haven't been able to find a fight that feels like it favors them.
Maybe the last good chance for the Leviathans here. Genetics to the skies and Genetics to the mid lane, but that's left Netrioid alone. Netrioid never got on the bus with the rest of his team, and now the Leviathans have a 5v4 advantage, and the rest of the Camelot Kings gotta hope their gold lead is enough. Damage-wise it is, but health-wise maybe not just yet. Clean pick for the Leviathans, and Netrioid left alone.
So if that goes right, if Netrioid with the rest of his team makes it to mid, that Phoenix is probably dead. As it is, what a wild fight that just happens. I mean, it's
Do the Leviathans just need to immediately pull FG here? Like, is this the best chance that they're going to get?
Yeah, honestly, probably. Like, look, you don't have crazy good security, but you've got decent damage. Once Zap gets over here, which he's running up pretty soon, this is the best opportunity you're going to have. A guaranteed 4v5. You can probably burn through one of the tanks. Like, just pull it. See what you can do. It's EFG as well. This could be a huge turn for the Leviathans.
You're so far behind. A clean 4v5 is about as good as it's going to get for the rest of this game, but the damage, slow burn on the enhanced Fire Giant. Is it now turn and fight? Seems to be the call, but you've dropped the Fire Giant, and you've lost a good chunk of your HP in turn. Jarcorrr is simply alone, and now the dash forward from Panitom brings Netrioid into the fight. The fight has been brought to Netrioid, who was just back in base, but now at the front of the fight, BigManTingz almost taken off by Tusky, but will end up living, and now this Merlin low health for the rest of the fight.
Hey, look, Variety's going to be able to find a very easy engage and keep chasing him.
Oh, this is big, and the Kings reposition, and the Kings knocking down the pins. Jarcorrr knocked up and tossed aside, and it is just damage and just burn from the Camelot Kings. Netrioid being dead was about as good as it was going to get for the Leviathans, but it has gotten a whole lot worse. Deicide to the Camelot Kings and the #1 seed. 33 minutes into Game 3, and Gore, they're going to knock out the Leviathans and move on to the semifinals.
That one feels, again, like such a good turnaround potential for the Leviathans. You had mentioned it, 10K gold down. Can we fight back knowing that the FG is on the other side, knowing what's going to be there? And there's a moment where if they capture Twig in the walls, if the stuns are there, if the damage follow-up is there, maybe things go their way. But it was just too much to ask, right? I mean, Twig was able to get out of there pretty cleanly. Didn't look like it was going to be a massive challenge for the Kings there. And the minute Twig gets out of there, I think that's where it starts to crumble apart. You've dropped the Fire Giant. You didn't get another pick. Netrioid's rejoining the fight. What was a 4v5 with your team being in favor has slipped through your hands, and now it's, okay, well, how good is your team fight? Well, you just used everything trying to initiate on the one guy. It's so much easier from there to just be like, oh, hey, Variety, go in and just exist. Be a Xing on the map, and it's going to be very easy for them. I think the good counter engage from the Kings there, I think it starts with that Fields of Love from Netrioid rejoining. That was the nail in the coffin, right? From that point forward, it was like, oh, you're not escaping. They're going to chase you to the ends of the earth.
Yeah, it felt like just some wake-up time needed for the Camelot Kings here. You lose in Game 1, Game 2's a win, but bit of awkward team fighting there. Takes 40 or so minutes Game 3 felt back to the Camelot Kings that we know, the number 1 seed coming out of the SPL, number 1 moving into this tournament. It's a hard-fought battle. Unfortunately, we have to say goodbye to the Atlantis Leviathans, but we can say hello to the Camelot Kings in the semifinals. That'll be tomorrow, but right now, go back to the desk to break this one down.
Yeah, just as Dave said, Camelot Kings are our first team to move on to the semifinal day of play. That'll be taking place tomorrow, best of 5 sets. From then on, except for the third place match on Sunday, that'll be best of 3. And the Atlantis Leviathans, the first team to go home. And this is a little bit more tried and true of the Camelot Kings playstyle. This is more so the Kings kind of coming back to stride. Felt like they needed a couple of games to warm up there, Charlie, but game number 3, this is where we start seeing those 5v5 group ups. You start making those more calculated plays, waiting for one person to step out of position, get those wraparounds, especially the fight around Fire Jam. I mean, Variety walking into the back line, fighting 2 with the ultimate before they can even touch the ground. They're dead, and from that point on, Camelot King can just roll through the rest of this game.
Yeah, I do think I have to give some credit to Variety. I think he played fantastic this whole set. Pretty much, the Camelot Kings were definitely in control throughout this match up until that one time when, I think Dave said Netrioid missed the bus, where, the genetics ult just goes up and everyone teleports except for the Cupid, and then the Leviathan's like, oh, okay, we'll just kill Cupid. I thought that might have been an opportunity. But as they highlighted, the 4v5 does not go in their favor. Netrioid is able to join back the fight after the fact, and that was all the Camelot Kings needed to clean up this set. CaptainTwig getting the Nemesis once again. He looked pretty good on it. This pick does a lot of damage, and it's able to shred through these tankier targets. Surprised that he got it twice, to be honest.
Yeah, very contentious pick within the jungle. Variety multiple times coming up with huge ultimates. That's the second case right at the very end of the game that ended up being one of the game-winning picks for the Camelot Kings to now run through this one, find themselves a 2-1, and starts their weekend off right by being able to move in towards the semifinals. A 5-1 game out of CaptainTwig. Netrioid, poor guy, not only did he miss the bus in the one Horus ultimate, he was the one person who got picked in the fight before that at Fire Giant. Whenever Variety was able to find those 2 big ones, Panitom did make his way into the back line and get a pick there. So Netrioid, kind of the eye of target more than anything for Leviathans in that last game, but that's not enough to stop the Camelot Kings. You got a 5-man roster of star-studded superstars like these guys. It's hard to really keep them down just by keeping one player away.
Yeah, I mean, Netrioid just said, guys, Mom said you had to let me farm with you, and then they kicked him off the bus. They flew away, but he still made it in the end.
They said, you got your item. Go away now.
Yeah, go away, Cupid. We don't need you. Netrioid got first blood. There was some aggression in that lane. You have a Horus, so you should be finding aggression in that lane, but just a funny set overall, and just one that I did not expect to start as slow as it did. Right, game 1 and 2 went extremely long, not a lot of kills. This one, as we highlighted, made a lot more sense, meta-wise, as to what we probably would have expected going into this set.
Very fair. Now we can take ourselves a look at the schedule and the bracket to see what we have available for the rest of you guys today. Taking a look at the bracket, Camelot Kings, the first team to move on to the second round of play. Tartarus Titans and Valhalla Valkyries, the winner of that, will move to face on the Camelot Kings in the semifinal. What a great prize for either of these two teams. And Olympus Bolts, Oni Warriors, Jade Dragons, Hex Mambo on the lower half of that bracket. And then obviously winners of those 2 semifinals move on to the grand finals best of 5. Loser of those, while they technically don't get to advance further in their bracket, they do play in that third place match. There'll be a best of 3 on Sunday held right before that grand finals match. And we can take a look at the schedule for the rest of the day to see exactly what order that we're going to be witnessing these games through. First one already done, and it's going to be the exact same order as the bracket, so no change-ups there. So what you saw at the very beginning is what you'll see throughout the remainder of that one. Tartarus Titans and the Valhalla Valkyries are next one. And if we're dialing back like maybe 4 to 6 weeks from now, 4 to 6 weeks ago, Charlie, we kind of write this one off of us. Okay, Tartarus Titans, bottom seed Valkyries, haven't been able to find anything. Probably too easy 2-0 win for the Titans. But the last time that these two teams faced off, Tartarus Titans were on the back foot for the first game, until the Valkyries made one little misstep in a team fight. They got wiped after they grabbed a Fire Giant, and then from then on, Tartarus Titans take the game right away after that one, then take game 2 because of it. So I think there's a lot of weight on this one for the Valkyries personally, thinking that was probably a set that they should have won, a set that they definitely could have won, but they just let slip right through their fingers.
Yeah, no doubt. And given the fact that the Titans, convincingly were able to win at our first Masters event, the first SMITE Masters event, this time you'd expect them to heat up, but the Valks have been looking solid, as you said, so we'll have to see exactly how that's going to go. A prize, as you said, facing up against the Camelot Kings, whichever team does win out. But both of them should be feeling confident. They made it this far, right? They're in the quarterfinals for a reason. I imagine we're going to have an action-packed set either way, and I expect to see not only some action-packed Smite, some interesting God picks. That's whenever I see the Titans when it's like tournament time, they're gonna change up the meta in some way. I'll be looking at the entirety of that map to see what they do.
Game 1 of our day is done. Game 2 right around the corner. Tartarus Titans and Valhalla Valkyries are coming up right after this break.